Chapter 111 Off to a New Plane. Finally, the day for the portal outing had arrived. All the first-year students had been told to gather up in the training hall, which was located on the east side of the building. Usually, the training hall was restricted to military personnel only, which didn't include students. When Quinn entered the room, he noticed it straight away because it was the same place he was in before he had been pushed by Peter. Nearly all the portals in the room had been pushed to the side of the hall, and only a single green portal stood in the center. The entire of Dell's class had arrived, which numbered around 50 students altogether, and currently, they were in groups of 5. They were required to stay in the same teams that they had registered for previously. In the center of each team was a large rucksack that had been handed to them. These contained the necessary supplies and needs for every team. There were food pills that lasted up to a month, water purifying pills, and first aid supplies to go with it. All right, boys and girls, Dell said as he stood just in front of the portal. I have some important information for you before you head in the portal, so listen up. When you enter the portal, the communication device on your wrist will no longer work. It is important when entering the portal, you keep physical touch with the person next to you. Otherwise, you will be teleported to another location. Quinn and Vorden both already knew this well. Also, you will randomly be teleported somewhere inside the shelter. Do not be alarmed. The whole shelter is safe and guarded by the military and other travelers. The expedition is to last a week, and the goal is to bring back as many beast crystals with you as possible. The team with the most beast crystals at the end of the week will get the highest score. The highest tier beast you will see in a green portal planet is an intermediate beast. But this is rare. If you come across one, please avoid confrontation and head to a different location. Then explained. Inside the shelter, there's a military base with a storage room where they will keep track of the crystals you have obtained. I suggest you do this at a regular interval, so you do not lose all your crystals. Our class is the first to enter, and every hour another first-year class will be sent. I hope this class stays competitive as your teacher. Dell continued to explain about the portal outings. He went on to suggest to other students to not travel too far from the original shelter they were based at, although there were several shelters scattered around the planet. There was no one to guide them between each one, and not every shelter had a military base. The test was also to begin as soon as the first team landed on the planet. It was up to them to decide how they should pace themselves while hunting. The whole aim was to allow the students to get to the point where they could be self-efficient. But the last bit of information that came from Dell's mouth was the worst news for Quinn. Please keep track of time and be well rested. This planet's day cycle is 72 hours of sunlight before it gets dark for another 72 hours. So you'll need to keep track of the time yourselves, and that is everything I need to say. At that moment, Vorden and Layla turned to look at Quinn, who stood there with his mouth wide open. Don't worry, Quinn. Layla said, I packed the umbrella. PFT, umbrella. Vorden said, I got something even better. Vorden then reached into the bag to pull out some sun cream. I think this might do the trick, Vorden said. Layla immediately started to laugh as she pointed at the bottle. You idiot. That's not going to work. How can you be so sure? Vorden snapped back. Guys, can you please all calm down? People are staring, Quinn said. And sure enough, everyone around them was looking at the two in a heated argument. While Layla and Vorden continued to quietly argue away, Quinn was making sure everything was in the bag, and Erin was playing around with her beast sword. The only one who wasn't, and hadn't said a word this whole time was Peter. He had made sure to stay quite a distance away from the others. One by one groups would be called up to enter the portal, but before Quinn group had been called, Quinn pulled Vorden to one side to ask him a few questions. Hey so, any news on who was behind the thing with Peter? Quinn asked. Nothing, Vorden replied. What, seriously? Yup, and when I say I roughed up the kids pretty badly, I really mean it. The only thing I found out from them was you weren't the original target, it was me. Vorden explained, although I did manage to follow them, and it seemed like they were heading into the second year, building an awful lot. I tried to get in to see where they were going, but no luck there. Perhaps I ruffled up a little too many second year's feathers. I see. Well, I guess maybe we should keep an eye on Peter for now. Hey, Quinn, Vorden whispered. Do you really not think this will work? Vorden then pulled out the sun cream he had brought with him. We already tried it, but thanks for looking out for me. Just then, the number of their group had been called, and they were ready to head into the portal. As Erin went to pick up the rucksack from the floor, another hand had reached for it. As she looked up, she noticed it was Peter. Please, let me help. Peter said, I don't want to be useless and drag the team down. Just let him do what he wants. Vorden shouted. The least he can do is carry our things. Standing in a row, the group stood behind each other, one in front of the other. Each was holding onto the shoulders of the person in front. At the back was Peter, and Vorden at the front. Now remember, don't let go, Dell instructed. In 7 days, you are to head to the military base and return through the portal back here. One by one, they walked through, and an odd feeling came over their body. Then finally, Peter was the last one to enter. All their senses were heightened as they went through the portal. Their minds felt like it was slightly spinning. Then after a few seconds, it was over. When the group opened their eyes, they were surrounded by townsfolk chatter and all sorts. Rows of buildings and shops, market stalls selling food and weapons. They had successfully made it to the shelter. But one person wasn't happy about it at all. You are in contact with direct sunlight. Your stats will now decrease by 70%. Chapter 1:12 Planet Kaladi. The shelter they had just arrived at was just as big as the military base they had come from. It was a similar size to the old towns that human civilization used to have. The only difference was there were no tall skyscraper-like buildings, and the biggest building in the shelter was a military one, which was only 3 stories high. The ground they stood on top of was hard and solid, a dry orange color with no sign of green life. It was hard to imagine anything being able to grow on these lands. It was clear that hot, blistering sun had dried out the ground. It was the first time most of the students had arrived at another planet, and even for Quinn, it was a significant difference compared to the shelter he was at before. The streets were full of people walking left and right, with the children by their side. Stalls everywhere selling all kind of things, hot smoky meat with fresh fruit and veg. This looks even better than some places on Earth. Quinn said, I wonder why more people don't move to the shelters more. Freedom, Layla said. If you look around you, most of the people here aren't travelers or work for the military. Most likely, all of them were low levels who could no longer afford to live on Earth. They were forced to move here, but I bet not many have ever left the shelter and gone outside. It means their whole life is this shelter. With power, it meant you had more choices. A high level was able to choose which shelter they wanted to live at and even have a place back on Earth. They could travel in between, and they weren't really restricted to anything. However, it wasn't the same for these people. They had to pick a place and never leave it. The shelters themselves were created and funded by companies or the military. The shelter they were at right now was owned by the government. As such, everyone was required to pay a credit tax for protection and to live there. Even travelers who would go out hunting, if they wanted to return back to Earth, would be required to pay a tax. While other shelters were owned by companies and factions, most of them owned by something known as the Big Four families. They were the strongest known originals, and usually their shelters were a bit higher class and imitated more of a city back on Earth. With this was the tier system. Each shelter was given a specific tier, Tier 1 being the highest and Tier 5 being the lowest. The higher tiers earned more money and were more protected compared to the lower tiers. The shelter they were in now was a Tier 4 shelter. The higher tiers had the power to protect it from higher-level beasts, so the tax cost more to live on one. When the group of 5 landed, they noticed that there was a circle drawn on the ground where they were, and the people walking around were doing their best to avoid it. "Come on, we better move," Borden said. "Just give." Quinn said slowly as he was already starting to sweat buckets. "Ah, Quinn, I'm sorry," Layla said as she rushed over and handed him the umbrella. "What's wrong with him?" Aaron asked. "Oh, he just really can't deal with heat and hates the sun. He came from really far up north. I mean like really far," Layla explained, babbling. Aaron looked Quinn up and down, who now had the umbrella propped up over his head. "You might be even more useless than Peter on this trip. How are you meant to fight with an umbrella in your hand?" This was a major problem. Although Quinn now had an ability and he could use it to fight instead of his vampire powers, he still had the weakness of the vampire, the sun. If he was to fight during the day, unless he used his skill Shadow Void, the sun would still affect him. But Shadow Void took up half of his MC points, not leaving him much to fight with. The other option was to use Shadow Cloak, which when he tested back at the military base also was able to block out the sun. The problem with this was he was unable to use his shadow abilities to attack while using Shadow Cloak. It was just a stealth ability. He could use his vampire powers, but that would defeat the whole point. Because of these reasons, Quinn still had to hide the shadow ability for a little longer until he found a solution to the sun. They did as Vorden said, and after a couple of minutes, another group of 5 students had landed in the same circle where they were. "How did you know?" Quinn asked. "Although the teleportation is random, it's not completely." Vorden said, "Think of it like a game with random respawn points. No one knows which point you will end up at, but they can tell where all the points are." "Well, where should we go first?" Layla asked. "Let's head to the Traveler's Hall. It's a place where they have information for travelers. You can also trade in your crystal cores for credits there, or just trade in general." They walked through the shelter and eventually reached a very large hangar-like building. It was an open space with no entrance, so people were free to enter and go as they pleased. From side to side, it was filled with counters that were stationed with workers. Just as Vorden had said, there were blacksmiths here who could forge equipment, shops that sold little gadgets and things such as beast bait, and even a quest board. The quest board was mostly filled with other travelers looking to group up and complete a task together. Sometimes civilians asking for protection were on there as well, as they traveled from one shelter to another. "Looks like we're not the only ones here," Aaron said as she looked at the groups. It was easy to spot the students, as they were required to wear the military uniform. Although some of them had beast gear on, nearly no one had a full suit of beast gear with them since they were only first years. "What are they doing?" Layla asked as she saw them go up to the quest board. "It looks like they're asking for help," Vorden said. "Those from a rich family will just hire travelers to do the hunting with them." "But how is that fair?" Layla asked. "Since when have they cared about fair?" Vorden replied. Those that have close ties with the military or have already sold themselves will actually be helped by the military." "Well, there's no point worrying about it," Quinn said. "All we can do is focus on us and do the best we can." "Says the useless one," Aaron added. The group walked up to one of the stalls that sold all sorts of items that would help with capturing beasts or even killing them. Behind a counter was an old man with a digital monocle over one eye. "How can I help you, young soldiers? I guess it's that time again when they send you all out to do your first hunt. We were wondering if you could provide us with a map with all the hunting areas?" Vorden asked. "Sure I can. There'll be a total of 100 credits though." "100? Layla said. "Are you sure you're not trying to rip us off?" The old man started laughing. "Well, that will be 150 now because of the young lady's rudeness." Vorden brought out a single card that was gold in color. Since the watches didn't work on other planets, each student was to bring their own money card to be used. However, the others noticed the color of Vorden's money card for it was very different from the rest of them. The different colors indicated how much money could be stored on each card. "Beep. Thank you for your business," the old man said. "Of course, you're a rich boy," Layla said, looking at the gold card. "I don't want to hear another word from you. I may have a gold card, but I only get sent 200 credits a month. You just made me use up most of my allowance." "Guys, calm down. I can cover you for the map, Vorden, so don't worry," Quinn said. As Vorden heard those words, he smiled back. He thought Quinn was just being nice. There was no way he would have that type of money. After all, he only received 10 credits a day from the school. The group opened up the map, which was on some type of digital paper. On it, the map indicated where they were in different areas around them, which were color-coded. It went from green, orange, and red. The closer the color was to red, the more populated the area was with beasts. But then something caught Quinn's eye. On the top of the map, it had the name of what planet they were on. Kaladi. When he fought against Nate a while ago in the VR game, he had asked Nate where his friend had obtained the strong, flexible cape. And the name of the planet, they said, was Kaladi, but they had forged it out of a winged creature out in the desert. If this was true, then he might have just found the solution to his sun problem. Chapter 113 U, Rechanging. As the group scanned the map for guidance, they noticed that all the areas closer to the shelter were more green, while the areas that were a bit further away were redder. The one area which had the darkest red of them all was the harsh, sandy desert. Is it possible for users to get a list of the beasts that are in that area? Quinn asked. The man we met at the shop earlier might have one. You could probably go ask him. Let me know if you need any credits. I have a few left. Vorden replied. While the group was discussing on where they should go, Quinn went back to the shop. As they guessed, there was a bestiary. It contained information on all the beasts in the local area. Quinn looked behind him to see the shopkeeper talking to a group of other students. The group seemed to be doing what Quinn's group was doing earlier. Excuse me, how much will a map cost? A student asked the shopkeeper. A map will cost you 100 credits. Does that include those that are registered with the base? Oh, no, of course not. That will cost you just 50 credits. The shopkeeper said with a slight laugh. As Vorden told him before, certain students had already decided that once their 2 years of service finished, they would then join the military. For the students that choose that, they would get special privileges compared to other students while out on missions. And that was especially true when they were in a shelter belonging to them. Annoyed by the fact their group was being mistreated, Quinn decided to pick up the book, which was sealed by a lock so that others couldn't open it and read it unless they paid for it. Quinn, however, had a suspicion that the lock would become irrelevant. Inspect. A book containing information on beasts belonging to the planet Kaladi. Teethworm, basic tier beast. Winged lizard, basic tier beast. Burning snake, intermediate tier beast. Please select one to find out more information. It was a success. That's what you get for trying to cheat us. As he looked at the list of names, Quinn was deciding which one of the three was the beast that Nate had talked about. Out of the three of them, only one had matched the description. It was the winged lizard. Winged lizard. Although this beast contains wings, it cannot fly. The wings are often used to spread above its head to intimidate other beasts from attacking. They are also the hardest part of the beast's body. The weak point of the beast is its underbelly. It can be found in the deepest parts of the desert. The description seemed to match the material of Sam's cape, but if Quinn wanted to make a full set of clothing from it, he would definitely need a large amount of beast cores. While he was there, he decided he might as well look at the other beasts. There was always the chance to encounter them, and if they did, it would be handy to know their strengths and weaknesses. Hey you, if you're not buying anything, then get out of here. I was just looking, Quinn said. The old man then walked over and snatched the book out of Quinn's hand. I said get out now, or else. Quinn stared at the man dead in the eye. People like you deserve to be eaten, Quinn said out loud. What did you say? The old man then lifted his hand. I guess no one taught you to respect your elders. He swung his hand, aiming right towards Quinn's face to give him a big slap. Skill activated days. User has been stunned. Suddenly, as the old man's hand was mid-motion, it was suddenly frozen in place. A second passed, and a shiver was sent down the man's spine. You're lucky the people are around, Quinn said as he walked away. Quinn's blood was boiling. It was people like him that allowed this society to work in the first place. They just watched and let it happen, and although the shopkeeper was weak himself, he still chose to treat the weak differently compared to the strong rather than help others like him. Quinn, you're starting to change. The system thought. When Quinn arrived back at the group, it looked like they had already decided where they would head off to. Did you get the book? Vorden asked. No, it was too expensive, Quinn replied. The group had decided that for the first day, they would head to one of the green areas nearby. They were unsure of how powerful the beasts were or what they were like. After defeating a few basic tier beasts, they would make their way into the red zone. Although Quinn was eager to go into the red zone to get his crystals, he was happy with the decision they had made. It was better to be cautious. They only had one life after all, and for the first 2 days, he would be at his weakest. 1 day of sunlight had already passed before they had come here, so there was only 2 more to go. As the group made their way towards their destination, Quinn and Vorden were in the lead and were talking about different things. You know, while you were in that shop, Peter kept saying some weird things, Vorden said. What do you mean? Quinn responded, confused. Well, the truth is, Erin wanted to head straight to the red zone. She was confident that even if we came across an intermediate beast with the 5 of us, we should be able to take one down. But that's when Peter started to shiver. He was adamant about staying close to the shelter. Do you think they might plan to do something on this trip? Quinn asked. I doubt it. Unlike the red portal places, there are too many people here. Unless we went completely off the map, there would be no way they would dare to try anything. But the important thing is that Peter believes that they will. The group had finally reached the exit where several guards were stood just inside of the wall. The whole shelter was surrounded by Galthrium, so the place was impenetrable to the beasts on this planet's attack. And even then stood up on the wall, there were 2 mechs stood side by side. After declaring they wished to go outside, the gates were opened, and the group was free to travel. The area they chose to go to on the map was a small little oasis. There was a hill of sand, and just over was a pool of water and the first bit of greenery and plant life they had seen. Sure enough, though they weren't the only group that was here, and it looked like the other groups were already engaged in combat. The area was filled with beasts known as teethworms. They would travel under sand but were easy to spot, as a big lump of moving sand was coming towards you. When they were close enough, they would pop out from sand and open their circular mouth, displaying thousands of small razor-sharp teeth inside. The worms were about the same size as an average dog, but were tricky to deal with for some, as the only time they would emerge from the sand was when they would attack. Peter and Quinn stayed in the middle while they allowed for the others to attack the worms. Vorden and Erin found it the easiest to deal with the worms. There was no need for her to even use her sword. As the worms jumped in the air, she would throw an ice spike through its mouth, and Vorden would do the same. Layla, on the other hand, found it a little more difficult. When they jumped from the sand, the attack was fast, and they would soon be inside the sand again. Even when using her telekinesis ability, her arrow was too slow. The arrow would hit the sand before even hitting the beast. The only way she could overcome this was to not use her ability at all, and just fire the worms with no fear. Still, it would take a couple of arrow shots for her before the worms were dead. As Quinn saw the group killing basic beasts left and right, he felt a little sad. Not because he couldn't join in. He was happy that others were fighting, but the fact that all of these kills could have been precious EXP for him. As he had this thought, a familiar voice sounded in his head. You know, if you blooded one of them, you'd be able to gain EXP of all their kills. The system said, what, seriously? Yeah, as a vampire you're the one who blooded them, which means they would become a part of your family. Quinn thought about it seriously for a while. Although Vorden had already declined, there was still Layla. She had already asked him to turn her into a vampire, and no, he really could. The only thing that was holding him back was that she was a kind of second blood bank to him. But now Quinn could also rely on Vorden for that. Perhaps it was something he seriously needed to consider. Chapter 114, Weakest Link. While thinking about whether or not to blood Layla, Quinn decided he would leave it to her and would ask her later, at a time when the sun wasn't out. If she became a vampire or something similar, she would have the same weakness as Quinn right now, and that wouldn't be good for the situation they were in. Not all beasts were hostile, but the teeth worms were definitely that. The slightest vibrations would cause them to react, thinking food was nearby, springing upon its prey and attacking them. Although there were quite a few in number, they didn't have the hindsight to attack together. Unlike the Radiclaws, which were more difficult to deal with. The level of beast didn't generally mean how strong it was, but how strong of a crystal was produced inside its body. There were some basic tiers stronger than others, and this was the same as you went up a tier. Although it was unlikely a basic tier at any strength could match the weakest of an intermediate tier. While the group was busy fighting away on the outside, one of the worms managed to wiggle past their formation and was heading straight for Quinn. Damn it, that one went right past me, Layla said as she turned around and saw who the worm's new target was. Quinn, she shouted, but the worm was too fast. It had already locked on and jumped from the sand with its teeth wide open. It's okay, Quinn replied. As soon as the worm had reached the shade of the umbrella, Quinn grabbed the worm mid-air by the end of its tail. It continued to wiggle around, stretching its body, trying to bite at whatever was in front of it. So ugly, Quinn said as he squeezed it tightly with his bare hands. The center of its body was strung like a towel as black blood fell to the floor. Basic beast killed. As long as Quinn stayed underneath the shade of his umbrella, he was at full strength no matter what came after him. For something as simple as a weak basic tier beast like a teeth worm, he could deal with it just using one hand. 10 EXP earned. First teeth worm killed, 100 bonus EXP gained. You are now level 11. 7200 EXP. Strength 16. Stamina 15. Agility 16. Charm 5. You have received 2 stat points. As expected, just like how the system no longer gave him experience points for fighting low levels in the game, it was now the same for basic tier beasts. Before Quinn would be awarded a 100 EXP per kill now, it was only 10%. However, there was some good news. It was the first time he had leveled up since becoming a full vampire, and he was now receiving 2 stat points instead of 1. He wasn't sure if this was the case if he leveled up again, but it wouldn't make sense if it wasn't. Stamina 16. Charm 6. For now, Quinn decided to put 1 stat point into his stamina. As he did, he felt a little energized. Then for the next one, he put it into his charm stat. Although half a second didn't sound like a long time, Quinn realized when using it in the game how useful it actually was in a fight. The second reason was because he wasn't sure if there was any way he could increase his charm points other than through the free stats. Drinking different blood types increased his strength, stamina, and agility, but he was unsure if it would increase his charm points. When asking the AI system about this, he said it had been a while and forgot. The group had taken out a total of 9 teeth worms together, and slowly the number of teeth worms that were coming towards them started to lessen, allowing Aaron and Vorden to relax a little. Nearby, a mound was seen right next to where Peter was standing. Was this here before? Peter said, staring at the thing. The next thing he knew, out from a mound of sand, another teeth worm came jumping out. All panicked, Peter fell to the floor and completely forgot about the earth staff he held on his back. But before the earthworm could reach him, a spear of ice came rushing from the side and killed it in one shot. I knew I would be carrying most of this team, but I didn't know I would be protecting it as well, Aaron said. You should at least be able to deal with this type of thing yourself. Thank you, Peter said. And I'm sorry, I'm just a bit nervous about the whole thing. Peter wasn't a horrible fighter. He had training from Vorden when the two of them were still friends and learned all the basics. If it was a one-on-one fight with an easy basic tier beast like the worm, then he should have dealt with it fine. But his mind was just far too preoccupied with other things. Even while the others were hunting, he would constantly look around them. Right by the oasis, another group had witnessed the whole thing and couldn't help but laugh at Peter's reaction. They were a group of 5 from a different class. The leader of the group was named Ben, and he wielded a large club on his back. After having a good laugh at the weak Peter, they continued to watch the group and noticed how easily Vorden and Aaron were dealing with the creatures. Look at that, they're killing so many of the things. One of them said, yeah, and they're leaving none for us. If we had an ability as useful as that on the team, we could do the same as well. Ben said, boss, watch out, one of them shouted as a teeth worm jumped from the side. He reached out for the club on his back and was ready to slam the thing to pieces. Instead, an ice spear came out from the side and accurately stabbed it through its body and into the sand. It wriggled about for a few moments before stopping completely. You don't mind if I take that one's beast crystal, do you? Aaron said, walking over. Sure, go ahead, Ben replied with a fake smile. While students were busy fighting multiple beasts, it was nearly impossible to obtain the crystals while fighting. It was best for them to fight first until the beasts stopped attacking. Only then would they receive the crystals. This caused an unwritten rule to be made. If you killed the beast, then the beast crystal was rightfully yours. The teeth worms were no longer jumping out and attacking, and now they had time to collect the beast crystals. How much did we get? Ben asked. A total of 4, boss. Seriously? As Ben looked over, he noticed that the other group must have obtained over 10, more than double their haul. Then he noticed something else as well. The boy at the back of the group, Peter, didn't seem to gel as well with the others. In fact, it was almost as if they were treating him as an outcast. They weren't talking to him and would hand him crystals to put in a bag every now and again. You're only as strong as your weakest link, Ben said with a smile. Chapter 1, 15 Red Zone. After a successful haul of 15 crystals, plus the one that Quinn had obtained, they decided to head back to the shelter. But instead of telling others of the beast he had killed, Quinn decided to keep the crystal for himself in the system. All crystals that were handed into the military base would be counted toward their points. However, the military would keep 10% of whatever they gave in to be counted. So instead, Quinn decided to keep the crystal inside his system, where it couldn't be found and sold later. Just as Del had said to them, the sun was still burning brightly, and it didn't look like it would set any time soon, but they knew they had been out for at least 6 hours, traveling to the location and getting ready beforehand. It all took a long time and was quite draining. They then headed straight for the military base, which was located at the center of the shelter. This was a square-like building that had several different departments, but for the next week, just in front of the building was a small stand for students. At the stand was a single adult soldier, and behind him a large digital screen. They handed the man the crystals they had collected, and after counting them, he took 2 of the crystals and retuned the rest back. The digital screen behind him then was suddenly updated. The name Layla could be seen, and the number 15 was displayed next to it. Out of all the numbers on the screen, Layla's name was placed in the middle, toward the top of the screen, where higher numbers and towards the bottom were lower. Some groups hadn't handed in any crystals yet and had a score of 0. Hey, do you see that? Layla said, pointing at the screen. Towards the top, a single group had managed to obtain 30 crystals, almost double the number of crystals their group had. Although Aaron and Vorden were considered strong, that was only true for their class. This didn't mean they were the strongest out of the first years. There were still several other first-year classes. While looking at the board, Quinn also spotted Logan's name, who was second on the leaderboard with 24 points. He hadn't spotted him since this expedition, but knew he would be here since he was a first-year student. I guess that's what a power level 8 can do. He must have some pretty strong teammates with him as well. Quinn thought. After finishing up, it was time for them to rest and sleep for the night. The solider behind the counter instructed the group where to go next. They did as he ordered and were led to a building near the edge of the shelter. It was a 2-story accommodation block that was used just for students during their outing missions. A room had been given to each team. There were also several blocks nearby for other students, and it didn't seem like there were any residents nearby. When they entered, they were surprised to see how large the space was inside. It was a lot nicer compared to their rooms at the military school. They each had their own individual rooms. There was also a cooking area and a living room. The cost of living was cheap on shelters, so they were able to provide bigger spaces for the students. Before they were to head off to sleep for the night or day, they decided that they should have a group meeting on the kitchen table. The 5 of them were sat down, and Aaron was the first to speak. I would like to make a suggestion, she said. As you all know, my goal is to come out as one of the top teams during this assessment. Right now, we're just above average, and I can't accept that. That's why I think tomorrow we should head into the red zone. Peter looked like he was about to say something. Contest against the group, but using her eyes alone, she had shut down Peter, not allowing him to say a word. I think we're strong enough, Vorden added. But the problem are these 2. The 2 people Vorden was talking about was, of course, Peter and Quinn. To be honest, Quinn wanted to go to the red zone too. Most likely the winged lizard lived there, but he had planned to go there when the day cycle had changed to night. He could use his shadow abilities, but would prefer to use it when nobody was around for now. There was still no way that Quinn could trust Peter to keep a secret if he knew, and then there was Aaron, who he didn't really know much about in the first place. There was also the fact that he didn't know how many beast crystals he needed. If he had obtained them as a group, he would have to equally share them with the group as well. I thought of that too, Aaron said. As you can see on the map, there's a safe zone just outside of the red area. Most likely it's a territory where 2 different beasts clash, so they don't cross each other's path. The 2 can wait there while we go inside and attack. After hearing Aaron's suggestion, Quinn didn't think it was too bad. If they were to leave him and Peter alone, then perhaps Quinn could sneak off at some point to hunt the winged lizards on his own. Well, since the 2 of them haven't rejected the idea, it looks like we have a plan, Aaron said. The group then went to rest for the night. They slept well as it was a tough night for them all, and for the first time, they didn't feel cramped and had space all to themselves. When they woke up, it was time for the group to head off once again. They exited the shelter, and their destination was the red zone. What the group didn't know was another group was following them closely behind. We just need to wait for the right moment, said Ben. Chapter 116 from the Big Four. The travel to red zone took longer than to the green zone on their map. It was located quite a while away from the shelter, but the area it covered itself was fairly large as well. It would take 2 hours to travel and 2 hours to go back. With breaks, it meant they roughly had around 6 hours of time to gain crystals. After all, their abilities weren't unlimited. Eventually, the body would use up the MC cells they had, and they needed a period for them to recover back. When leaving in the morning, it looked like their group wasn't the only one heading for the red zone. There was a total of 4 other groups altogether. That's our competition, Aaron said, looking towards one of the groups who walked in front. Which one? Layla asked. You see the boy at the front with the red hair? It's the trait of the Red Shield family. All originals who learn their magic acquire the ability of fire. You mean he's from one of the Big Four? I didn't realize there was someone in our school like that. Layla replied. Although he isn't anyone special from the family, he is still from one of the Big Four, and the numbers on yesterday's scoreboard proved it. The ability of fire, huh? Vorden looked at the red-haired student for some time, trying to think up of an idea. But the one that interested Quinn wasn't the fire user. Instead, it was Logan, who was also a part of one of the groups heading to the red zone. While the rest of Logan's teammates were walking through the sand, Logan was sitting on top of a strange contraption. It seemed like a moving chair, a personal device that he had built for himself. The legs moved like that off a dog, while the top half was just a normal chair. Inside the chair, he was sitting with his eyes closed, sleeping peacefully. I wonder what his ability really is, Quinn thought. It had to be impressive to be able to get the second highest score. Throughout the whole time the 2 of them were together, Quinn still hadn't figured it out. And for some reason, Quinn felt like it was rude to ask. Most high levels would keep their abilities secret. If 2 people were to get in a fight, knowing their ability beforehand was a huge advantage. While the rest of the groups continued to move forward though, Aaron's group had decided to change direction, slightly heading off to the left. I can't believe we're wasting time, dropping these two off here, Aaron shouted. You don't need to babysit us, Quinn replied. If you care that much about getting ahead of the others rather than protecting our weak asses, then go ahead and leave. After Quinn's words, Aaron did just that and decided to head off back to where the red zone was located. Are you sure you're going to be okay? Vorten asked. Don't worry about it. If trouble comes our way, I have a trick up my sleeve to fight them off, Quinn replied. You see that building up ahead? It looks like an abandoned well of some sort. We will wait for you in there, and come get us on the way back. Before leaving, out of Peter's large rucksack, they handed Layla a few food pills and bottles of water that was placed in Layla's small bag. It'd be just enough for them while they were away out hunting, and if they needed some more, one of them could always come back and get some from Peter. Boss, it looks like the group have split into two. Maybe the strong ones are heading to the red zone. Who should we follow? One of the men said to Ben. We stick to the plan. Ben said, our group won't be able to compete with all those big shots at the red zone. It was never our intention anyway. I managed to do some research on their group yesterday. It turns out that their group had 2 level 5 powers users, and wait for it, 2 level 1s if you can believe it. Seriously? They must be like the only level 1s in their whole class. Well, now it makes sense why they have split off from the group. They would probably get in the way if they were to fight. If we take their crystals they got yesterday, then we will climb up from the bottom of the leaderboard. We should be able to finish off at a decent position for the test. Back at the red zone, Vorten and the others had finally arrived. Most of the groups had spread out from each other, making sure that they didn't get in the way of each other's hunting process. The red zone was filled with winged lizards, but the area was also slightly different compared to the rest of the sandy desert they had encountered so far. The area was filled with several large rocks that contained large holes on the inside. The holes were where most of the lizards would stay, but there were a few resting on top of the rocks as well. They were quite large in size and were about double the size of the teeth worms from earlier. Before hunting one of the beasts, the group stayed and watched patiently for one of the other groups to attack first. A single person would walk up to the group of lizards and send out an attack, catching the attention of a single beast. Then the person would lead the lizard to the group, and they would all attack it at once. They were being cautious not to attract the attention of all the lizards after all. While attacking the lizard, it seemed to be a much more difficult foe compared to the teeth worm. The lizard would constantly block attacks from the beast weapons and certain abilities using the wings attached to its arms. Eventually, they would manage to defeat it. But while the other group struggled, one was finding it easy, and that was the one with the flame user named Berg. Berg's flames were stronger than the beast wings, and it didn't matter what it did, it would be set aflame, and sooner or later the beast would die. Watching this, Vorten had an even bigger smile on his face. Now only if there was some other flame user in our group. Chapter 1:17, a new fire user. After watching the other groups deal with the winged lizards, Vorten and his group decided to implement a similar strategy. Layla would be the first to approach one of the rocks, and then fire out an arrow hitting the foot of one of the lizards. After using her ability, she was able to take the arrow back out and swirl it around the beast's head like an annoying fly. The lizard followed the arrow easily, and now it was Vorten and Aaron's turn to deal with the beast. A trail of ice started to form across the floor, eventually trapping the lizard's forelegs. Now that its movements were restricted, it was Vorten's turn. He created ice spikes in his hand and continued to throw them at the lizard. But even with its feet tied, its arms were still free to move. It blocked each one of its attacks, lifting its wings and shelling up like a turtle. You idiot, Ratton said. You know from watching the others that it won't work. Either shut up or help. Vorten shouted as he continued to throw the ice spikes. Eventually, Vorten knew the beast would get tired, and it wasn't as if his attacks were doing no damage at all. But proceeding this way would take far too long. Before he knew it, he could see Aaron up in the air with her long sword held in her hand. As she fell to the ground, she sliced downward at the beast's wing. A large gash was made, and black blood started to pour out. A few seconds later, though, the wound that was created started to freeze. Slowly, the ice began to grow until it completely froze the beast's left wing. Now, with one wing frozen in place, Vorten was finally able to throw an ice spear directly into its body, killing it. Did we finally do it? Layla said, looking at the thing. She quickly extracted the crystal and placed it inside her small bag for now. This is a problem, Aaron said. It is taking us far too long to kill a single one of them. Even if there are many, it takes 3 of us just to kill one. We will be better searching for another group of teeth worms at this point. Then they heard cheering coming from their left side. The group with Berg in charge had just finished burning 5 of them to a crisp at once. The look on Aaron's face was currently one with disgust. Come on, let's just go into one of the other areas and find a bunch of teeth worms to deal with. Hold on, Vorten shouted. I have a plan. Berg and his group had just finished killed their 8th lizards and were currently resting for a bit. He needed some time to recover his MC points before he could use his abilities again. I still have a long way to go, Berg said, looking at his hand. Although his flame powers were strong and he was considered one of the strongest in school, he couldn't say the same about his family. They would have been able to go on for a lot longer and create more powerful flames. Every original family was different when it came to teaching their members about their powers. They had their own methods, and for the Red Shields, it was all about discovery. After teaching them the basics, they had to learn about the ability themselves and get stronger. Hey, Berg, watch out, a voice from the side said. As he looked up, he noticed a human body was flying his way, and before he knew it, they had crashed into him. The 2 of them tumbled into the sand and eventually stopped. That bitch, how could she do that to her own teammate? Vorten said as he lifted himself off the ground. I'm sorry about that. Do you need a hand? Just then Vorten reached out his hand and lifted Berg. Hey, what do you guys think you're doing? Another person said as he came running over. You just barged into our leader. Enough, Lippy, said Berg. I'm sure it was an accident. Lippy, who was also a part of Berg's team, was surprised by his actions. If a person usually did something like this, he would have burnt them by now. But the reason was simple. When Berg looked at Vorden's watch, it currently displayed the power level of 8 on it. Not knowing what Vorden's powers were, and the possibility there was someone of equal strength to himself, he didn't want to get into a fight. "We're sorry," Layla said as she came running over with Aaron behind. "Our idiot teammate was being annoying, and I just needed to throw him somewhere." "Don't worry about it," Berg said. "Accidents happen." After apologizing, the three of them decided to leave the group be and go hunting once again. Vorden, now having the flame abilities, was ready to burn some lizards. "Why'd you let them go off like that?" Lippy asked. "That person, he was a level 8 user. Let's keep an eye on them for a little bit," Berg said. Nearly everyone already knew of Berg's abilities due to him coming from one of the Big Four families. However, the same couldn't be said for the other high-level users or originals. Keeping an eye on Vorden was keeping an eye on the competition. Berg had seen the group just go behind one of the stones. Although he wasn't paying much attention to them before, he was sure that their group was hunting on the same side of the rock like them. Why did they choose to move? He thought. The curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to go scout out and hunt a bit closer to where Vorden had gone. After walking around one of the large rocks in the center, he could see Vorden and his team, just as Berg saw them. He could see Vorden burning one of the winged lizard using his fire powers. "What, but how?" Lippy said. "Is he part of the Red Childs?" "No, I've never seen him in my life. It looks like we've got some questions to ask." Chapter 1:18 Fire versus Fire. Before doing anything drastic, the group wanted to test out Vorden's new fire abilities. They did same as before with Layla drawing out one of the lizards and then Aaron freezing the lizard's movements. When they were ready, Vorden shot out a stream of fire from the palm of his hands. The beast screamed and howled in pain. After a few seconds, the beast caught on fire, and Vorden no longer had to supply it with energy. At this moment, Berg had just turned the corner and witnessed the whole thing. His mind was going crazy with thoughts. Did someone outside of the family know how to use the fire abilities? If that was the case, they needed to get rid of him before anyone else knew or found out. While Aaron was busy carving out the beast to find its crystal, a fireball was spotted coming towards them. "Look out!" Layla shouted. At the last second, Vorden turned his head and fired a fireball of his own equal in size. As the two fireballs clashed, a small explosion was created, and sparks of flame flew out onto the sound. "You must be dealt with. No one is allowed to learn the secrets of the flame," Buck shouted. Shooting out fire from the palm of his hands, he was able to propel himself forward while running, making him move at an incredible speed. Vorden readied his self, planning to fight back with anything Berg would use. If Berg shot out a fireball, Vorden would retaliate with the same. If Berg shot out a stream of fire or made a pillar of fire, then Vorden would do the same, only better. This was how Vorden had won all his fights before. His experience when it came to fighting was able to outmatch those that knew their own abilities inside and out. But then at the last second, Berg propelled himself into the air. A stream of fire was seen coming from the bottom of his hands and feet. It looked almost like he was flying in the air. Spinning flame kick. Using one of his legs, the fire would shoot out from the back of his heel, causing him to spin. Then with the other leg would let out multiple blades of fire. "Damn it, I can't do that," Vorden shouted. As the blades of fire were coming towards them, Vorden lifted both hands, creating a small wall of fire. If Vorden thought he was safe, though, he was wrong. As the blades of fire touched the wall, it ripped right through and continued to go past. By now, Layla and Aaron had long moved to the side and become spectators of the whole thing, and the same could be said for Berg's teammates as well. It was clear that all of his attacks were aimed at a single person, and he didn't care for the rest of the team. "What is going on?" Aaron asked. "I don't know, but I do know Vorden knows how to annoy a load of people. Perhaps this is just one of them," Layla said. Although Vorden's flame wall was useless, he was able to see the point of when the flames would touch the wall, for they would slightly part away a piece of his wall just before the blades of fire touched. This gave him enough time to dodge every single one of the blades coming at him. "This guy is pretty good," Lippy said, watching the whole thing from the side. The second Berg landed on the ground, he dashed forward, using the flames once again to propel him. Vorden fired fireball after fireball, but then Berg just covered his hands in flames and would knock them away. "Looks like your fire is no stronger than mine, you thief," he shouted. Then with his hands covered in flames, he went for a punch towards Vorden's face. Vorden could see the punch coming towards him. When it came to hand-to-hand combat, he was skilled and had years of experience as well. He could see it coming and was planning to duck, but suddenly the fist sped up in an instant and knocked Vorden into the ground with his head bouncing off the sand. Vorden laid on the ground, unmoving with his eyes closed. Although Vorden was unable to see what had just happened, the rest did. When Berg threw the punch, he had done nothing special, but it was what had happened at the last moment. Berg had the ability to produce fire from any part of his body. The clothes he was wearing were specially designed by his family, so they wouldn't burn away. As the last second, before the fist was to hit Vorden, he had produced a strong flame from his elbow, pushing his fist forward and giving it an extra boost. Vorden was used to elemental abilities, but had never come across the fire one before. It was an original ability, unlike ice, wind, earth, and water. However, none of these acted like the flames which came from the body itself. With the destructive nature of fire as well, it was why it was considered one of the strongest elements. "What should we do?" Layla asked. "Should we go over and help him?" "I don't think I'll kill him," Aaron replied. "There are too many people here he would have to silence." "Well, he's from the Big Four, right? Would the school really do anything?" The two of them at that moment looked at each other. To be honest, Aaron hated this feeling, but she knew when someone was stronger than her. Berg hadn't even taken a single hit from Vorden, and she feared if it was her, it would have been the same result. Standing right over Vorden's was Berg. He continually looked at Vorden's still body. "Why isn't Boss doing anything?" Lippy said as he watched. He couldn't explain it himself, but for some reason, he felt like if he touched Vorden at this moment, he would be the one lying on the ground. Then a few seconds later, Vorden's eyes opened. Inside the dark black room, Vorden had finally woken up. "Well, man, you sucked," Ratton said. "That guy really showed you." "Wait a second," Vorden replied. "If you're here, then who's in the chair?" Chapter 119 No Chance. Quinn and Peter had been walking for a good 15 minutes as they headed to what looked like a little abandoned well, something that was once used to draw water out. It was used at a time when the shelter was first being built by the workers. Although building works, and such didn't take as long as they used to, especially since the introduction of Earth ability users. Some powerful users would charge quite a bit for their service as they were able to construct building after building. While the two of them were walking, not one of them had said a word to each other, and Quinn was the type that hated an awkward silence between two people. In the end, he gave in and just had to say something. "Why did you do it?" Quinn said. Peter didn't have to ask what he was talking about. It was as clear as day. They continued walking for a while longer until eventually, Peter replied, "I don't want to make any excuses. I know what I did was terrible. Everything, I don't even deserve to speak to you. But you don't understand, Quinn, I was scared. They had already gone for Vorden and managed to catch him. Then they went after me and—" "Enough," Quinn snapped back. "I don't want to hear anymore. You were right the first time when you said you weren't going to make any excuses. But then you went on to list a bunch of excuses. I'm not saying you didn't have a reason for why you did it. When someone does something wrong, everyone has a reason, be it good or bad, but after everything we had done for you, why didn't you come to us? Could you really help me? Quinn, would you be saying the same thing if you knew who was behind everything?" Peter asked. "Did you give us a chance?" Quinn replied. "Do you know the saying, you miss all the shots you don't take? We were right there next to you the whole time, and it wasn't like stuff like this didn't happen before. You saw what happened to Vorden, did he change? And you should know more than anyone that I got the same treatment as you from my old school." The two of them had finally arrived at the village, and Quinn turned around to look at Peter. He could see his teary face, tears on top of tears running down, and he was using his sleeves to wipe everything away. "When you chose to go against us that day, Peter, you were the one who had given up. You didn't try taking a shot, and made your chances go down to zero." The two of them looked around the abandoned well. In the center was a giant machine used to draw water. It had rusted, and just from looking at it, you could tell it hadn't been used in a while. The only other thing in the place were two abandoned buildings. One room was completely bare apart from a single window, while the other building had a couple of broken wooden bed frames. After taking off the rucksack and putting it on the old bed, Peter finally laid down and was getting some rest. He had managed to carry the large backpack all the way through the desert, and unlike Quinn, he didn't have supernatural strength to help him. The heat didn't actually affect Quinn much, no more than it did when he was a human. It seemed like the sun must have contained some other unique property that affected vampires. As long as he stood under his umbrella, he felt absolutely fine. But thinking about this, it reminded him he desperately needed those beast cores. If he wanted to craft a special material, he couldn't rely on Vorden and Layla to gather enough. Then finally, he would be free from the restraints of the sun. "I'm going to go exploring around for a little bit. Are you ready to stay here?" "Don't worry, I won't be going too far." "Are you sure you're going to be safe?" Peter said. "Yeah, as long as you aren't behind my back, I'll have nothing to worry about," Quinn said jokingly. "Sorry, that was a low blow." Quinn pictured the map in his head. He remembered the red zone was quite a large circular area. They had just come from the left direction, which was where Vorden and the others went. So as long as Quinn went right and forward, he should be in a different area of the red zone. With that, he decided to head off into the desert with his umbrella in his hand. Watching all of this happen was Ben and his group. It looks like the two of them have split up. You three go for the kid with the umbrella. Take off everything, even his money card, and get him to transfer everything over. Me and Hugo will go get rid off the other one. They did as told, and three of their men went off to follow Quinn into the desert, while Ben and his friend Hugo had decided to enter the same building that Peter was in. "Oh, what a surprise we have here," Ben said. "I didn't expect anyone to be so far out here in the middle of nowhere. And when I looked earlier, it seemed like not a single person was around." In the desert, before Quinn had even reached the red zone, he could hear the sounds of people getting closer to him. His vision wasn't as great in the sunlight. It was about the only thing that was still affected while in the sun, but his hearing was always top-notch. "Who sent you?" Quinn said without turning around. "That's none of your business now, is it?" One of the students said. "Now you better listen to what we say or else." "Or else what?" Quinn said as he turned. "I'm sorry, some people think I'm a bit slow." The students then lifted up their watches to each reveal their levels. One was a level 4 student, and the other two level 3s. "I hope you understand," the level 4 user said. "Oh, I see. Because you're a higher level than me, I should be scared now, right? I should obey everything you do because I don't want to be hurt." Skill active shadow void. Suddenly, from underneath Quinn's feet, his shadow started to spread. It grew and grew until it encompassed a large area in complete darkness. The shadows that formed the walls were continually moving. From the outside, it looked like a giant cloud storm. Quinn then tapped his watch 3 times and lifted it up for them to see. The number had changed. He was now level 6. Chapter 120, the little 1-inch S name. Vorden stood there, standing in the sand. He hadn't moved for a few seconds now, and his head was facing the floor. From the top of his head, a trickle of blood was dripping down onto his forehead, and little by little droplets would fall to the ground. "Why is the boss just standing there?" Lippy asked. The truth was Bird couldn't explain himself. Something about the person he was facing a few seconds ago had suddenly changed. He felt the same presence as when he was just about to face one of the elders in his own family. Then for the first time since being beaten to the floor, Vorden had moved. He lifted his hand and wiped the blood away before staring at it on his sleeve. "You guys said you would protect me." "Hey, don't look at me, Syl," Ratton said. "Vorden was the one who got knocked out before I could even do anything. Maybe it's time for a change?" Syl said. "What? And leave this person in charge?" Vorden argued. "If you do this, you'll be lonelier than before. Even Quinn won't stay by your side." "Quinn? Ah yes, Quinn," Syl said as he looked around at where he was. "I don't see any Quinn. This will be good." Ratton said. "Hey Syl, that man in front of you is hiding Quinn from us." Syl then looked at Berg up and down and started to walk towards him, but his face wasn't peaceful or anything. It was like that of a demon. The anger could be felt, the emotion, everything. Berg could feel it just coming from his face. "Stay back," Berg shouted as he covered his forearms and fist in flames once again. As Syl took another step forward, Berg was at his limit and knew he needed to attack now. Placing both hands together, he started to fire a pillar of flames from his hand like a flamethrower. As the fire came towards him, Syl swung his hands, lifting a pile of sand with it and dropping it straight on the flames, causing it to extinguish. When did he get my ability? Layla said, watching the fight. And why is it stronger than mine? I could never lift that amount of sand. Vorden's ability is strange, Aaron said. But if I remember correctly, he could control 2 abilities. Perhaps it has something to do with that. Seeing this, Berg too was shocked. He had thought Vorden was just someone who had learnt the family secret. Maybe tortured one of their members into teaching it to them. But now suddenly, he was using another ability. How is this possible? While Berg was shocked by the whole thing, he started to feel an icy presence climb up from his feet. What is this? He said as he saw his 2 legs freezing. In an instant, he activated the fire to cover his legs, causing it to melt the ice, but all Syl wanted to do was stall him for a second or so, as he formed an ice spear and threw it directly at his shoulder. It landed and pierced Berg, but he couldn't complain long as pillars of fire were already rising from the ground. He has your ice abilities as well. Layla said, that's 3 abilities, just how strong is Vorden really? While using one hand to cast pillars of fire, the other hand would continue to throw ice spears. Berg could only dodge these 2 attacks for so long. Come on, he has to be running out of MC soon. Berg said. Inside the black room, Ratton was busy laughing. I bet you this guy thinks he can win the match as long as he waits for Syl to tire out. Well, that's not happening. Right now, Vorden contained 3 abilities. Whenever he copied a person's ability, he also copied the amount of MC points in their body. This is also the same for all the other abilities he stored inside his body. But Vorden's ability and cells were unique. As long as he had copied an ability, he would be able to change any of the MC cells into whatever type he wanted. Using the fire ability was a level 8 ability, Aaron's ability was a level 5, and Lael's ability was a level 2. This meant he had a huge amount of MC points to use, and if he wanted to like earlier, he would be able to change all his cells into one type of MC, which was why Syl was able to lift the sand to take out the fire, while Layla would have never been able to achieve something like that with her ability. As the fight continued, Berg could tell that Vorden wasn't tiring out. He needed to act fast, as fire came from his right and ice came from his left. Berg crouched into a fetal position and started to let the fire build up inside him. Then when the attacks were right by his side, he expanded his limbs and out came a sphere of fire, getting rid of all the attacks. But now Berg was panting and sweating hard. It was a last-ditch effort to protect himself, but he really didn't know what to do after this. Where is Quinn? Syl asked as he walked over. Layla and Aaron were too far to hear any of the words Vorden had spoken, but were worried that he might do something drastic. Crazy boy, I beg you don't do something crazy. Layla said. Wait, Vorden shouted. Ratton was lying. Quinn is safe, he's somewhere else. Let me take over, and I can show you. You damn rat, Vorden. Ratton shouted back. Now I'm going to get my ass handed to me. I'm tired, Syl said. Now Vorden had finally reached where Berg was standing. I don't want to make an enemy of you, but you attacked us first, Vorden said. Suddenly the feeling Berg once had, now was gone. When he looked at Vorden, it was the same as before. I'm from the Blade family. It's probably best if our 2 families don't get into a confrontation with each other. As soon as Berg had heard Vorden's second name, he finally understood. The Blade family weren't as big as the Big Four, but that was because they chose not to be. They were a secretive family that didn't choose to have much influence in the world. Because of this, not many knew about them. Berg didn't really understand why, but his father had always said if he was to meet someone from the Blades, to show absolute respect. Berg placed his head in the ground and started to apologize. I'm sorry, it's my fault that this all has happened. Is there anything I can do for you? Vorden thought about it for a while. He hated to use his family name like this, but he was sure at least the Big Four would know of it, but while he was using it, he might as well take advantage. It's okay, but I'm going to have you hand over your crystals you got today and yesterday over to us, Vorden said, smiling. Of course. While Aaron, Layla, and the others watched this scene, they couldn't believe what was happening. They knew Vorden was an original, they even knew of his family name, but they had never heard of the Blade family before. But for some reason, someone from the Big Four was bowing down to him, apologizing and even handing over their crystals. Just who are you, Vorden? Layla thought. Chapter 1:21 Naive. Berg and his group handed over the crystals they had obtained inside a bag. Vorden now had a big grin on his face, just before he had split off with Quinn. Quinn had asked him to try to get as many winged lizard beast crystals as possible, saying he needed them for some reason. And right now, in the bag, there were 39 winged lizard crystals in total. After talking it over with Berg, Vorden eventually decided to head back to Aaron and Layla. Hey, boss, you gonna let him go just like that? Lippy said as he saw Vorden walk away. It's okay. Berg said, we can always get more crystals. We will soon get our #1 spot back. But it's important to keep the relationship and our lives intact. That's the most important thing. Walking over with a skip in his step, Vorden was over the moon about his haul. As Layla peeked inside the bag, she couldn't believe her eyes. What, I don't understand. Layla said, how? Don't worry about that. I think it's best if we head back and hand these crystals in to be counted towards our score, and I'm a little worried about Peter. But aren't those crystals useless? Layla asked. Most of them have already been counted. Each crystal inside had a unique pattern to it. Every single crystal was unique, similar to a human fingerprint. When the crystals are counted, they are placed into a machine that assigns a certain code to each crystal. These unique codes are then added onto the team scoreboard. Once crystals were counted, students were able to do what they wanted with the crystals. Sell them for credits, turn them into beast gear, or even trade with them. But what they weren't allowed to do during this assessment were buy beast crystals. The whole shelter was under strict instructions to not sell any beast crystals to any students. This was to avoid a group from buying crystals and registering them under their points. But there was a reason why these unique codes were assigned to each team's codes. Oh, I guess you guys don't know. Warden said, my brother did the same thing 2 years ago, so I have a little bit of insider information, I guess. Although the same crystals can no longer be registered for points. If the crystals belong to another team, the unique code from their score will go onto ours. So while their score would drop, ours would rise. This information was purposely kept from the students, but was told to a select few. Either originals like Vorden knew of it, or those who had already registered with the military. Well, I hate to say it, but you actually did a really good job this time, Layla said while pouting. She knew when compliments were to be given, and this was defiantly one of them. Well, while we are ahead, why don't we keep on hunting? Aaron asked. The truth is I'm worried about Peter. Because of this, he might be targeted. Warden said, if you knew about this, then why didn't we leave him in the shelter? Aaron asked. If we did, it would just be the same result. Perhaps even more so. People would attack him as soon as they saw him on the street. There was acutely a second reason why Vorden and Quinn wanted to bring Peter along. They were hoping to draw out whoever Peter was afraid of. Peter seemed pretty sure that someone was going to attack them on this expedition, and if so, Vorden and Quinn thought they could find some answers. No one would attack a fellow student like that. Are you crazy? I understand when the second years attacked you. Aaron said, you're the one who attacked them, but why would they just randomly attack another student inside the shelter? Even if it meant getting their crystals, no human being would just attack another because of the test. And even so, people would rush over to help him. At that point, Vorden and Layla looked at each other, and both of them had the same thought. Aaron, you do know that Peter is a level 1, right? Vorden asked. What does that have to do with anything? She replied back. It was as the two had thought. Aaron was unaware of the treatment that lower levels received compared to everyone else. The truth was Vorden and Layla already knew this to some degree. Most of the students at the school who were mid-range levels didn't experience much of the bad side, and this was true for Aaron as well. The two knew this was the case. Many of the students were just unaware of what happened, but they just didn't realize that Aaron was one of them. Aaron herself never mistreated low levels, but just never paid them any attention either. She had one goal, and getting to know them wouldn't allow her to achieve anything. As the three of them started to head back to where the well was, the two of them began to explain to Aaron just what really happened at the school. But not only at the school, but what happened on the outside world as well. But the strong would never steal from the weak, Aaron said. Just what does that prove? We already know we are stronger than them. Wouldn't it make more sense to fight against those that are stronger than yourselves and try to improve as a person? Just what is there to gain from all of this? Aaron just couldn't comprehend why certain people would choose to do such things. In the situation with Vorden and Berg, she could understand. The two of them had battled it out and had a grand duel. The loser Berg had gifted Vorden with the crystals as a prize. But neither group had aimed or started a fight with the sole purpose of stealing the crystals. Every person is different, Vorden replied. Honestly, if we knew all the answers of why people acted a certain way, then perhaps we wouldn't be in the situation we are in right now. At that very moment, Vorden's fear was becoming a reality, as Ben and his group had just spotted Peter inside one of the buildings. Chapter 1:22 Crash Landing. As Peter heard the footsteps enter the small little building he was in, he quickly realized that he had no way of escape. It was a small room with only one entrance, and the two men stood in front of him were completely blocking his path. He was trapped. Now this can be nice and easy for you, Ben said. Only one of those crystals in your bag. Peter then reached out for the earth staff that was placed on his back and pulled out in front of him. Really? Ben said, looking at the thing. Look, we can either do this the easy way or the hard way. I'm really not into hurting others like some of those sick psychopaths. All I want is a good score on the test. As soon as Ben stepped forward, Peter lifted the earth pole towards Ben's face and then using his ability, transformed the end of it into a sharp tip. Please, Peter said. Let's not do this. I can't. If you take the crystals away, they'll hate me even more. Tears were now visibly running down his face and falling to the ground. They already hate me too much. I just can't have them hate me more. Peter cried. Peter stood firmly, not allowing the spear to move. It was pointed at Ben, who was standing in front of the other person, just below his chin. Look, it's Peter, right? Ben said. Suddenly, Peter's face changed a little when he heard his name. Do you know why I know your name? We're part of the military too. In fact, Duke was the one who gave us all the information. I promise you that Duke will reward you if you hand those crystals over to us. Although Ben and his group did belong to the military and helped Duke out from time to time, Duke had requested no such thing. Ben knew using his name would cause a reaction out of Peter. The low levels always ended up in Duke's hands one way or another, and it was the same for him. But by the time Peter knew Ben was lying, he knew Peter wouldn't say anything. He could complain to Duke, but what would he do? What would he care for a level 1 ability user while Ben was a level 4? Seeing the change in Peter's eyes, Ben thought his words were a success, but when he stepped forward again, Peter decided to go in for a stab. I said I'm not letting anyone take them, he shouted. As the spear was thrust forward, one of Ben's friends from the side lifted his hand, and with it, an earth wall was placed between the two of them. The wall managed to catch the spear in the center and snap it in half. Unlike higher-level earth users, Peter could only control the earth when he was touching it. As he saw the wall being placed in front of him, he immediately dashed forward and touched the wall. Using his ability, he created multiple spikes sticking out from the other end. While doing so, Peter closed his eyes, waiting to hear the screams from the other end, but they never came. Instead, a few seconds later, a huge club had been swung and smashed the wall into pieces, also hitting Peter, sending him flying back. The blow was so powerful that Peter didn't just crash into the wall, but caused it to collapse and was now outside covered in rubble. The wall wasn't very strong and stable from years of decay, and it wasn't very well built either. But still, to be able to knock a human through such a thing, an immense amount of power was needed. What a useless struggle. I would have thought someone like you would have been broken in by now, Ben said as he walked through the hole in the wall and stared at Peter on the ground. Peter was barely conscious. A small trail of blood was appearing from his mouth, and his whole face and hair were covered in debris from the wall. Please don't hate me, Peter said. Peter's mind was a mess. He didn't even know where he currently was or even who was in front of him. I'm sorry, Peter. This is just how the world is. At that moment, Peter passed out. Ben went through Peter's bag and took the 15 crystals that were obtained in yesterday's expedition. They then also took Peter's money card, which was white in color, the lowest possible card you could get. They decided to leave everything else intact, the food pills, the water purifiers, and the first aid supplies. Although they were thieves, they were just doing as the system suggested. They weren't cold-hearted murderers. Ben and his friend had decided they would head to the shelter together, but before heading back, they would make a stop at the oasis to hunt some more teethworms. That was the meeting point to meet the other three who had gone after Quinn. As they were walking, one of them spotted something large and black in the sky coming towards them in their direction. It was flying in the air, and it seemed like black smoke was coming from the back. What is that? One of them asked. I don't know. I think it's a spaceship, but I've never seen one designed like that before. Ben replied. The black object drew closer, and it was roughly the same size as a large car. Then finally, just in front of them in the sandy desert, the ship had crashed. It continued to skirt across the sand and was heading straight for them. Get out of the way, Ben shouted. The large black ship continued to bump and skirt across the sand until eventually it had come to a stop around 50 meters from their direction. The spaceship was black in color, but it didn't look like it was made of type of metal material like Earth's ships. Instead, the outside was bumpy and looked scale-like, as if it was carved using the outside of beasts. Then in the center was an oval-shaped sphere, but the glass was too thick to see through. Do you think they're okay? They're lucky the ship didn't blow up, he said. I wonder what happened. But while Ben's friend had no clue what it was, Ben was visibly shaking with fear. He had seen images of one of these before. Run now, Ben shouted. The sphere-like shape opened up and out stepped what was known as a Dalki. Chapter 123, Shadow Void. Out on the sandy desert, where the area was mostly covered with rocks and sand, one area looked different today. From the outside, it looked like a dark cloud that was continually moving and shifting, creating a large dome-shaped space. What is this? One of the men said. The three from Ben's group were now surrounded by moving shadows. Although the inside of the shadow void wasn't pitch black, as one would think, the shadows seemed to give off a slight purple light that allowed the interior to be seen. Did you see his watch? Another one said. He was actually a level 6. We need to get out of here. It was the first time Quinn had cast the shadow void skill. He was unsure of how big the area of effect would be, and whenever or not, he could deactivate it once the skill was used. If something like that was seen at the school, it would have caused alarm bells to ring. Inside the shadow void, Quinn could feel a connection with the shadows. It was hard to explain, but it was as if it was created using a part of his own body. Quinn looked at his stats, and, as the system had told him, everything was normal. There was no weakness to the sun. While Quinn was busy checking his stats, one of the men tried to make a break for it. He ran to the edge of the shadow void walls. This was bad. If the three were to escape from the shadow void, then Quinn would lose his advantage. Out of instinct, as Quinn saw this, he lifted his arm and started to shift the wall of the shadow into some type of arm. When the man was close enough, he tried swinging his dagger at the arm, but when it made contact, his arm started to slow down, and he immediately pulled it back afraid of what was happening. MC points 48 out of 100. 50 points of MC had already been cast to activate the shadow void, and it looked like if he used shadow control on the outside walls, it would use up his MC points. However, the others didn't know this. They felt like they were trapped, and if they were to go close to the wall, the arms would once again appear. One of the students, the level 4 user, had a mohawk. The situation around him was starting to frustrate him as he felt more and more trapped. Screw this guy, Mohawk said. You saw the number on his watch change, right? He's probably a fake, and besides, being a level 6 doesn't mean he has strong abilities. The other two, hearing Mohawk's words, gave them a bit of confidence. Yeah, you're right, and he doesn't even have any beast gear. One of them said. Out of the three of them, one of them held a crossbow on his back, while the other had a set of daggers around his waist. Mohawk, who was in the middle, had a chest piece that gave him extra strength. Get him, Mohawk shouted. The crossbow user pulled out his bow and started firebolt after bolt towards Quinn. Shadu Akib. Shadows started to form around Quinn's arms and legs, and suddenly they were covered in beast gear. As the first bolt came towards him, he lifted his hand, deflecting the bolt onto the ground. If Quinn wanted to, he could have used his shadow ability to block the bolt, but right now it was best for him to use his vampire abilities because he would soon be able to replenish whatever blood he was about to use anyway. What, but that was a beast arrow. It wasn't just made out of metal. The crossbow user said. Just keep firing the thing. Mohawk shouted. He did as ordered, and arrow bolts started to fire one after another. This time as they came forward, the other user who had remained still had gathered what looked like a small hurricane in his hands, and then at the right moment, he brought his hands forward, and a gust of wind came out with it. The wind seemed weak, but it wasn't his aim to do any harm. It was to support the bolts, making them faster and more powerful. Let's see you deal with this. Opening his palm, facing forward, Quinn waited until the right time before using his skill. Blood spray. 55/60 HP. A spray of blood left the palm of his hands and knocked each of the arrows out of the air, causing them to break and fall to the ground. Now it's my turn. Quinn activated his wind walk on his boots to further increase his speed. While doing so, he used the inspect skill on each one of them. The crossbow user had the ability to duplicate items, although each item that was duplicated would only be half the strength of the original. This was how the crossbow user was able to continually fire out the arrows. The other student was a wind ability user, and lastly, Mohawk was a level 4 earth user, just like the one he had faced in the game once, only this one didn't have a full set of beast gear equipment on. First, the annoying one. With Quinn's added speed with the boots and his reflexes, it was nearly impossible for the crossbow user to hit him, and then when Quinn was close enough, he cast out 4 blood swipes, swinging out his arms. With no defense, the 4 attacks each hit him dead in the chest, causing large cut wounds across his chest and to be thrown onto the floor. 51/60 HP. Next was the earth user who was by his side, and this time, Quinn wasn't giving him no chances. 1 second Quinn was in his view. The next moment Quinn had performed flash step, and, at the same time, hammer strike dealing a blow right on the chest. His chest piece started to crack until it eventually broke away, then blood spewed from his mouth as his insides were ruptured, and he too fell to the ground. 46/60 HP. Suddenly, a sharp pain was felt inside Quinn's back. As he turned around, he could see the wind user holding the small little daggers in between his fingers. "I got you," he said. He threw another dagger, and it came out too fast for him to react, hitting Quinn's stomach. 42/60 HP. Quinn then looked at the dagger and pulled it out of his body. As he did, the wound slowly started healing as the skin could be seen coming back together, until finally, there was nothing left apart from a hole in his military uniform. "You monster!" the student shouted. Continuously throwing blades, he managed to hit Quinn repeatedly. Making sure to cover his face with his hands, Quinn rushed forward, not caring for the small blades hitting his body. 38/60 HP. 34/60 HP. His HP continued to go down, but Quinn didn't care. Without realizing it, the student was moving backwards out of fear. He continued to move backwards until he finally felt something grab onto him from behind. As he looked down around his waist, he could see the shadow wrapped around his body. He tried to fight against it, and it was working, but he was only moving ever so slowly from the shadow. It was as if time itself had slowed down for his body while touching the strange substance. "Now, tell me, who sent you, and why did you attack me?" Quinn asked. Chapter 124, Increasing the Charm. The wind user was trapped inside the wall of shadows, but it was a strange feeling. It wasn't like he couldn't move, but instead, if he tried moving, his movements would be incredibly slow, like he was stuck in some type of glue. In his panic, he had completely forgotten about his ability. With his mind now thinking straight, he used his hand to cast a wind blade, cutting a piece of shadow. It quickly separated and then started to reform again in almost an instant. The moment the student had cut the shadow with his wind ability, Quinn's MC had decreased. 44 out of 100 MC. It also seemed that while Shadow Void was active, he would be unable to gain back his MC points like he initially thought, which meant he had to be even more conservative if he was planning to use his Shadow abilities along with the Shadow Void. But just like when he used Shadow Control on his own Shadow, whenever the Shadow was attacked, his MC points would lower slightly. The student cast Wind Slash after Wind Slash and was slowly able to move more. Then finally, he was free. "I did it," he shouted, but when he looked up, Quinn was there right in front of him. He grabbed both arms of the wind user and twisted them inward, so his palms were facing towards his own face. Then Quinn kicked both feet of the user, causing him to fall to his knees, and once again the shadow had grabbed onto his legs. With the elemental user, the ability to control the elements came from their hands and feet. This was different for fire and some other elements, but this fact was true for the basic ones. "Now I want you to answer my question from earlier. Why did you follow me?" "I'm so sorry," the wind user said with a stutter. "It was all Ben's idea. He said that we would be able to take care of you level 1s and take your crystals, add it to our team's points." The wind user was deadly frightened. Not only had he never seen such a strange ability before, he was still trying to decide if the person in front of him was human. It seemed like he was a person with multiple abilities. He could control the shadow, shoot out red aura from his hands, and on top of that, he had supernatural healing, and now, with the wind user's arms twisted, he felt like he had superhuman strength as well. "This Ben, does he work for anyone?" Quinn asked. "I mean, we all work for the military, but no one told us to do anything if that's what you're asking." Quinn couldn't be 100% sure if he were telling the truth or not. But judging by his reaction and how frightened he was, Quinn felt like his words were true. "You know, if you increased your charm stat a bit more, you'd be able to get these weak-minded people to tell you anything," the system said. "Are you kidding me?" Quinn asked. "No. There are certain skills in your system that will only unlock once you get enough stat points. One of them is a type of mind control for the charm stat. It is quite handy. If their mind is weak, you can replace their memories, get them to spill the beans, or even if it was really high, you could even get the person to kill themselves. Of course, that would only be for the very top of vampire classes." It seemed like the charm stat was becoming more and more dependable. At first, Quinn thought it was just an annoyance that only allowed him to get girls, but that didn't seem to be the case anymore. "Do you know how many points in charm I need to unlock this skill?" Quinn asked. 10 points are needed for the influence skill. 140 200 EXP. Right now, Quinn and gained 20 EXP for defeating the level 3 student and 40 EXP point for defeating the level 4 student. Then there was also the 2 daily mission he completed, bringing him up to 140 EXP. Even if he did defeat the wind user in front of him, that would only bring his experience points up to 160. It wouldn't be enough to level up. When using his inspect skill at the 2 around him, one was blood A type while the other 2 were blood O. The blood O stat allowed him to put a point into anything he wished. Still, he was unsure whether that included the charm stat or not, but it was likely. But even then, he would only have 8 points in his charm stat. He needed 10. The reason why Quinn was so adamant about unlocking this skill after hearing about it from the system was because he didn't know what to do. The 3 users here were from the same school as him, and they had seen his ability. It would have been fine if it was just a shadow ability, but they had also seen his blood abilities as well, and his incredible healing. If he could, he wanted to avoid killing his fellow students, but it was something that would have had to be done. In the end, they were the ones who attacked him, and it was a secret he couldn't afford to be let out. But could he really do it? Technically he had killed already, but back then he wasn't sane of mind. Quinn would even argue that it wasn't really him, but something else controlling him. But killing someone while he was fully sane was another thing altogether. Just then, from the corner of his eye, Quinn saw something forming from the ground. The sharp object shot out like a bullet, and Quinn managed to move his head and dodge at the last second. Suddenly, heavy breathing sound could be heard. When Quinn looked at the wind user in the shadow wall, he could see that an earth spike had impaled right through the wind user's neck. Blood was flowing down the spike as the student struggled to breathe. More spikes started to appear from the floor. and when Quinn looked ahead, he could see that the Earth user had regained consciousness and was barely standing on his feet with his hand held out. "Die you bast RD," he shouted. Thinking about the spike, Quinn felt like he had just avoided death. Sure, he had plenty of health points remaining, but if the spike had impaled him through the head, he was pretty sure he wouldn't have been able to recover from something like that. "You just tried to kill me," Quinn shouted, "when I was just thinking about sparing your lives. Humans are truly disgusting," Quinn thought. For some reason, he thought if he could change, maybe they could too. They were still young, and only students, they had time to change their ways. In a fit of anger, Quinn sent out blood swipe after blood swipe. The Earth user tried to raise a wall between them, but the wall was far too weak. The second the blood swipes made an impact, the wall was smashed, and the blood strikes continued to hit the user. Quinn continued to fire out blood swipe until a message had appeared. "A level 4 human has been killed, 80 EXP gained." At that moment, Quinn stopped. Chapter 125 Influence. 210/200 EXP. Congratulations, you are now level 12. 28/65 HP. 2 free stat points have been added. 10/400 EXP. Quinn wasn't thinking correctly and purely attacked out of anger. The fact that someone had almost killed him, he just reacted, and what happened was not part of his plan. But just like when he looked at Ian's dead body, Quinn felt nothing looking at the Earth user's body lying there lifeless in the corner. Then from the back of the shadow void, he could hear a groan. Bivik Sveme. It was coming from the wind user who still had the Earth spike lodged in his throat. The color in his face was now turning pale. If Quinn were a healer, then perhaps he would have been able to have done something, but he had no such abilities. At least not something that could heal at this level. After biting his victims and noticing the marking on their necks healing quicker, Quinn decided to do a few tests with Layla before coming to the planet. What he had found was that his salvia seemed to have some type of healing ability. If he was to cause a cut mark on Layla to draw blood, then rubbed his spit on her, the mark would heal quickly, but it was clear his spit wouldn't be able to save someone from something like this. Walking over to the wind, user Quinn looked at him. "Your own friend did this to you." "No, you did this to yourself when you tried attacking me. I will put you out of your pain." Casting his blood swipe from above, and at a close range, he managed to cleanly cut off the wind user's head, and now he was no longer in pain. Level 3 user killed, 60 EXP gained. 7400 EXP. So, I really do get more EXP for killing them. Just like with the Earth user, Quinn had obtained double the number of points after killing the victim. The reason why he received more for the level 3 was most likely because he hadn't knocked out his opponent yet, but straight out killed them, allowing him to earn 60 EXP points instead of 40. But his mind felt conflicted. He felt no emotion when seeing the dead, and the mangled bodies didn't affect him. Even before, when he was a halfling, he still had a little sympathy, but now he hardly felt any. "I guess I really am no longer human." Walking over to the body, Quinn lifted the dead wind user's arm, and using the tip of his clawed gauntlets, he made a cut across the wrist. At that moment, the sweetest taste had entered his mouth, and his body started to feel re-energized. 65/65 HP. Blood type O has been consumed. 1 free stat point has been added. Before doing anything else, Quinn checked if the free stat point could be put into his charm skill, and just like he thought, it could. He then went on to the next body, the Earth user, and had done the same. This time there was no need to consume a large amount of blood since Quinn's health was full, and he had already eaten his fill. Putting his equipment back in his dimensional space, he dipped his finger into the blood and gave it a little lick. A blood type has been consumed. +1 strength stat. The last person was the crossbow user, who also had the O blood type. He was already bleeding across his chest. The wounds weren't too deep. It seemed he had passed out more from the impact rather than the wounds themselves. Blood type O has been consumed. 1 free stat point has been added. After getting everything he needed, he could finally increase his charm points to 10. Charm points, 10. New skill. Influence has been unlocked. Depending on a user's charm points and the mental strength of the opponent, the user is able to influence the person or creature to do their bidding. This includes things such as memory loss, information extraction, and so on. Must make direct eye contact with the target. Looking at the bow user on the ground, Quinn was tempted to just end his life there and get the experience points. However, he felt like he really would have lost a grip with himself if he did. In the end, he decided to try out his new powers, and if it didn't work, he would have to go through with it anyway. Lifting the user up off the ground, Quinn slapped him across the face a few times until the man eventually woke up. As soon as his eyes opened, Quinn activated his new skill. Skill Influence activated. Skill successful. Around the user's eyes, a small red circle could now be seen, and his body went slightly stiff. "What do I do now?" Quinn asked. "Just say whatever you want, and it will happen. If you ask him a question, his brain will process the information and answer. If you tell him to forget something, he'll forget it. You can even replace the memory, but that's a little risky, to be honest, and doesn't work well if he gets pulled in for questioning." Quinn did as the system said and gave out his instructions. "I want you to forget everything that happened today. You never saw me, and you never met me. You just came out to hunt some beasts, and I want you to go back to sleep." "Do you think that's enough?" Quinn said. "Yes, if you can, I would bury the bodies under the sand. Eventually, they will be eaten by the beasts in this area, but when he wakes up, he will have no clue what happened and can only assume it must have been a beast." The color around the man's eyes returned to normal, and he quickly went back to sleep as Quinn had ordered. After burying the bodies into the sand, he started to look around the place for his umbrella. Eventually, he had found it, but it wasn't good news. Sometime during the fight, the umbrella must have been destroyed. With his MC points only half full, he would just have to bear the sluggish movements in the sun for now while he recovered. Quinn then tried to cancel the shadow ability, and slowly from above the shadows started to shrink and disappear. The fight had lasted about half an hour, so he still had another 30 minutes of the shadow void left if he wished. But if he left the shadow void up, his MC points would not return. The shadow started to slowly clear and shrink back until it all went right underneath Quinn's feet. "You're being hit by direct sunlight. Your stats have been reduced by 70%. Immediately, he felt sluggish, and his head started to hurt. Once his MC points had returned, he was sure to use Shadow Cloak to cover himself and get out of the sun. Then, just as Quinn was getting ready to set off, he spotted black smoke off in the distance. Isn't that next to where Peter was? Chapter 1:26, Follow the Smoke. Vorden and the others started to make their way through the dry, harsh desert. They didn't encounter many beasts on their way back. It seemed like the desert beasts were much more of a territorial creature. The map was quite accurate in indicating where the beasts were located and where they were not. And as long as they were outside any of the colored zones, it seemed like they wouldn't run into any more beasts. Eventually, after walking through the desert, they could finally see the small well area in sight. That's where Quinn said to meet them, right? Layla asked. Yeah, they said they would be here. But just then Vorden stopped and looked down at the ground. Rubble from one of the buildings could be seen everywhere, but what shocked him most was Peter. He was crawling across on the ground towards them. His legs had been hurt, and possibly a few of his ribs broken. The only thing he was using was his forearms to crawl along the floor towards them. Peter, what happened? Layla asked as she came rushing over and knelt down by his side. But Peter continued to move forward, using his forearms, completely ignoring her. I have. Toperta mumbled. I have to get back those crystals. Otherwise, those guys will hate me. I can't live anymore. Peter said. Then suddenly, Peter had come to a halt as his hands seemed to hit something. Peter, you've done enough, Vorden said, as he knelt down and placed his hands on his shoulders. Peter was half conscious the whole time, yet there was one thing in his mind keeping him going forward. He had dealt with the gruesome pain of being tortured, but he couldn't deal with everyone hating him. He realized now that back then, he had chosen the wrong decision, and he wanted to change that. He wanted to change himself. The others hated him. So what? Because he hated himself even more. But when he had heard Vorden's words, something in his mind had clicked, and he had snapped out of his half-dazed state. He looked up and could see Vorden bent over in front of him. Immediately tears started to run down his face. I am sorry, Vorden. Peter cried. They took the crystals. I tried. I really tried to stop them. I promise. I know you did, Vorden replied. At that moment, all the energy had left Peter's body, and he had completely collapsed, passed out on the floor. What do you think happened to him? Layla asked. Aaron had ignored Peter for the most part and went straight for the bag past him. It was laid on top of the rubble. It's gone, Aaron said. They took our crystals. Well, I guess it was pretty clear what happened then, Vorden said. Wait a minute. What about Quinn? I don't see him anywhere. Layla said. Well, it's not like we can ask Peter what happened, Aaron replied. They probably took him away too. Although it was possible, the other two doubted it. Both of them knew before heading out to this expedition that Quinn had the shadow ability as well as his blood abilities. It sounded like if there was ever an emergency in the sun, he was pretty confident about fighting. Unless the group that attacked them were high levels, they just couldn't see Quinn losing in a fight. Vorden also believed that it was unlikely to be a group of high levels. Otherwise, they would have confronted them without waiting for Peter to separate from them. Was it perhaps one of the group of people working for the second years? No, they wouldn't hurt Peter like this. Even if he refused to work for them, they would probably kill him in case he told anyone, but instead, they left him alive. Vorden thought. Out from the bag, Aaron had pulled out a little first aid box. It looked to be made of metal like a small briefcase and had a small standard red cross on it. Then she placed it on the ground and pressed the red cross. The little suitcase started to transform into what looked like a little droid. How can I be of assistance? The droid asked. Student Peter, chuck over there. Administer whatever you can to make him feel better. The little robot then scouted off and started to scan the area until it had eventually found Peter injured on the ground. It started to scan and brought out small tools patching up Peter wherever it could. Will he be okay after this? Layla asked. He should be. That robot can deal with some pretty serious injuries. It's like having a personal doctor with you. Aaron replied. As long as he isn't near death, he should be fine. But I do have to warn you guys, we only have one of those things. Once the medicine has been used to treat any infections and such, it doesn't really have the supplies to treat us again. I'm surprised you actually let Peter use it then, said Layla. Aaron didn't actually want to use such a precious item on Peter. She felt like it was useless. Peter would eventually heal on his own anyway. This would just speed up the process. But after hearing the words of the others and seeing Peter in pain like that, it made her realize that perhaps the others weren't exaggerating about the mistreatments of others. Just then, Vorden spotted the sign of black smoke off in the distance. Do you think that's them? Probably one of them using their abilities, said Vorden. It doesn't look too far away, and we can get our crystals back. But what about Quinn? Layla replied. Why don't we split up? Vorden suggested. We can't just leave Peter out here. I'll stay with him in case anything happens. When he's all healed up, we'll go looking for Quinn. You two can go get our crystals back, but if it looks too tough, then fall back and come to the well. Layla didn't like the sound of Vorden being the one to rescue Quinn, but it seemed like the only thing they could really do. If Layla was to go out on her own and a powerful beast appeared, she could get seriously hurt. They could send Aaron to look for Quinn, but she didn't know his secret, and that would mean she would be stuck with Vorden. With them agreeing, it was the only thing they could really do. Vorden stayed with Peter while the two girls headed off the area of black smoke. Chapter 1:27 The Dalki. On Earth, on one of the very few pieces of land that still existed, was a reasonably large tower that had been built. It was on a small island where the only thing on it was the tower itself. The tower was so large and grand in size that if someone was to stand at the top of it, they could reach the clouds. But its purpose wasn't for anything grand like tourism. Such a piece of equipment as grand as this could never have been able to be built before. But thanks to Richard, Eno, and his team, they managed to finally finish it after the war. This sole tower's purpose was to monitor the activity of each of the planets on the other side of the portals. It needed a strange source to power it that only Eno knew of. It was the same source of power used to power the portals. With this, they were able to get a clear view of what the area looked like. They had mapped out each planet the portals led them to in that solar system. There were still many planets left unexplored, but they kept good track of those with shelters on. But today, unlike any other day, red alarm bells were ringing inside. The people were rushing all over the place. In a single room, they had about 200 employees, all looking at a computer screen of their own. Then there was also the main monitor that resembles a cinema screen. "Sir, it looks like there's been a breach on one of the green portal planets," one of the men at the computer said. Standing at the back of the room was a man who looked to be in his 50s. He was mostly bald with hair just sticking out of his sides, and he had small round glasses on his face. Although he was not one to seem intimidating just from looking at him, when he spoke, his words gave a certain feeling of trust. Inside the monitoring room, he was the only one wearing a lab uniform rather than a military one. "Bring up the information on the big screen in front of you," he ordered. They did as asked and managed to pull up a small video. It was of a black flying object that had entered the planet's atmosphere. It looked to be slightly injured even before arriving on the planet. There are meant to be no Dalki in this area. This is near the start of the solar. The Dalki's planets were mostly at the back. The Dalki and humans shared the planets in this specific solar system. When they had entered, half of the planets had already been conquered by them, while the other half remained empty. Although not at war with each other currently, the two were at a race with each other to see who could conquer more planets. Each planet had several different resources, and that included the different beasts that lived on there. From time to time, this would still cause friction between the two, and a fight would break out. That was why the large observation tower was built in the first place, in case any of the Daliki ignored their upper command and decided to attack. Send a message out to Daliki Station. Ask them if it's from any of their known battalions, and tell them we'll get rid of it at all costs. "Yes, sir." Also, inform the military base, which is in charge of the planet, get them to send someone to deal with this immediately. "Will do, sir." Out on the desert, the black smoke was now rising into the air, more ferocious than ever. It looked like a signal was being cast, and could probably now been seen for miles out in all directions. Although Ben had told his friend to go ahead and run away, they both stood there. As the Dalki got out from the ship, they felt like their eyes couldn't leave such a powerful being for even a second. The Dalkis were a lot taller than an average human, but not too big that they looked like giants. This one, in particular, stood around 7 feet tall. However, their body frames were different. Just like humans, they walked on 2 feet and had 2 arms, but their muscle structure was magnificent. Nearly every muscle fiber on their body could be seen. Just like the humans as well, they wore beast gear to increase their power, and right now, this one had only a set of bottoms and boots on, while his top part was open and free. The Dalki were a race that looked similar to dragons in human myths, only more human. They had scale-like features running from the side of their body, running up to the top of their neck. Their eyes were slightly pointed and more oval-shaped, and their hands were shaped like claws with a tail sticking from its behind. As Ben looked at the Dalki, he noticed that it had a single spike coming from the back of its spine. This was good news, as they had learnt the fewer spikes they had meant, the weaker they were. Every time a Dalki went through a type of evolution, a new spike would appear on its back. Yet this one had only one, meaning it was the weakest a Dalki could be. "Maybe we have a chance." Ben shouted. "It's too late to run now, but if we face it together." As expected from a half-human, half-beast-type creature, the Dalki were overall just better than humans in every way. They were faster, stronger, and even more intelligent. Ben knew they had no chance if they turned their back, so there was only one option. Ben reached for his club on his back and pulled it out. "Are you ready, Hugo?" he asked. After asking his question, no words were heard, and a few seconds later, a thud sound was heard. As he turned his head, he could see his friend's body lying there in the sand, dead. Ben didn't even know what happened. Out of fear, he charged in with his club held in his hand and used all his strength to smash down at the beast, but with a single hand, the Dalki grabbed the club and then crushed it to pieces. It came as a shock to Ben, for he had the ability of super strength. He was 5 times stronger than an average human, yet the Dalki was able to block his attack with ease. "This place stinks," the Dalki said. Chapter 128, Going Back. The two girls continued to walk through the desert. There were no signs of footmarks in the sand, as the wind would quickly blow it away, so the only thing they could count on for where they were was the map and the trail of black smoke in front of them. "Wait up, Aaron, slow down, it's really hot out here," Layla complained. While Layla was struggling with the heat and wanted to walk at a standard pace, it seemed like Aaron was power walking through the desert. It was to the point that if she was walking any faster, she would actually be jogging. "I can't let them take our crystal. If they hand them in and we lose our points, then that means we could lose our place at number 1. So what? It's not worth risking our lives over. Even without those, we should still get a pretty good position. Why do you need to be number 1 so much?" For the first time, Aaron had paused and stood still in the sand. Her fist was clenched, and just as she was about to say something, she bit her lip to stop herself. "Come on, we're not too far off." By now, the black smoke had covered most of the view in front of them. It was hard to make out where it was coming from. But what they did know was that there was far too much smoke for it to be someone else's ability, and they were in the desert. There wasn't a lot of things that could be caught on fire, so just what on earth was making that much smoke? Layla thought. Then as they were walking, Layla suddenly sped up as she spotted what looked like a small black spot in the sky. As it got closer, she noticed it looked ball-shaped and saw that something was dripping from the bottom of it. "Hey, what is that?" Layla asked. "I don't know. It might be someone's ability or something," Aaron replied. "Maybe you can catch it." Layla planned to do just that. Before the object could hit the ground or come towards them, she would try to stop in the air. Although Aaron was also prepared in case the object was too heavy for Layla to control. Finally, when it was a few meters in the air, Layla managed to stop it and slowly brought it over to their location. But a few seconds later, she forgot about everything and immediately dropped the object onto the floor. A thump sound was heard, and it rolled onto the sand towards them, with a trail of red was sinking into the sand. "That was definitely a head," Layla said with her voice all shaky. "I'm not seeing things, right? It was a head. Was it a beast, or maybe something else even? It could even have something to do with the black smoke," Aaron said calmly. "How are you not affected by this? Come on, we need to get out of here. Our lives are worth more than some stupid crystals," shouted Layla. Let's get back to the well and tell the others. But Aaron stood there deep in thought. If it's an intermediate beast, and I use my full strength, I should still be able to take it out? She thought. Now is not the time to be playing games. Look, Aaron, I like you, and usually I would just leave someone as crazy as you here, but I'm telling you we have to go. Layla continued, despite the silence. But then, in the distance, a tall figure could be seen coming towards them, its tail slowly moving to the left and right. What is that? Layla asked. For the first time, Aaron didn't seem like her confident self. In fact, Layla had never seen her back down from challenge, even when Vorden was facing off against one of the big four. Although she said she was weaker, she had never displayed a hint of fear. However, right now she was different. She had crossed her arms over her body, hugging herself and shivering in the desert heat. Mommy, please save me, she said ever so quietly, that the only words Layla could hear was mommy. Now that the creature was even closer, Layla could finally see what Aaron could see. It had appeared many times in many textbooks as they grew up. Constant videos had been shown to them of their appearance all throughout their school life. It was a Dalki, but it wasn't alone. As it walked, it seemed to be dragging something along with it. Oh, is that another two I see? The Dalki said. He then looked at Ben's body, which he had been dragging with him. It now had no head, but the rest of its limbs were still intact. He placed his foot on the body and pulled on the arm, ripping it from its socket. It's a bit closer than last time, but it's not as easy to throw. The Dalki aimed at the two in front of it, leaned back, and speared the arm through the air. It left at an amazing speed and power that it seemed like the wind around it was having no effect. Seeing the arm coming towards them, Layla knew this one was too fast for her to slow down with her ability. They barely managed to dodge it, with Layla pulling Aaron away from the area. Aaron, we're getting out of here. Drawing her hand back, she slapped Aaron across the face, leaving a red mark as she spoke. But it seemed to have worked. Aaron was no longer shaking, and she knew the danger the two of them were in. Ice path. She created an ice path in front of her, and then formed blades below her feet. Do you know how to ice skate? Aaron asked. No. Then hold on. Lifting Layla onto her back, Aaron started to skate down the ice path at amazing speed. Every time they would reach near the end of the path, she would extend the ice in front of her. It was several times faster than the two of them running, and they were able to create distance between the two. The best thing to do would be to head to the shelter and get another ship. The Dalki thought. Those two girls were probably heading for the shelter. If so, it would be bad news if they warned everyone before I got there. I guess I better stop them. Unluckily for the two girls, if the Dalki knew they were not heading for the shelter, he perhaps would have left them on their own. Their destination was actually for the well, hoping to warn Vorden and the others. Not only that, but the Dalki was actually blocking the path back to the shelter. They could go around, but it would take too long, and Aaron was afraid the Dalki had already set its eyes on them. So, the only option she felt like she had was to rely on Vorden. Chapter 129, My Family. After the droid had finished patching up Peter, it went back into the suitcase-like form that it previously had. Vorden placed it back in the bag and decided to carry both him and Peter over to the other building, which hadn't been destroyed in the struggle between Peter and Ben. There was no bed in the second building, but it was better than staying outside in the heat of the desert. Vorden was currently looking at Peter, who was bandaged from head to toe. The little droid had even performed stitches in areas that had an open wound. Although it wouldn't matter too much once they found someone with a healing ability. They would be able to heal Peter up properly, and then there wouldn't be any sign that he had received any damage. Did we go too far? Vorden said to himself. Too far, are you kidding me? Ratton said. You seem to be forgetting that this person basically sent us off to our death. Ratton, don't you remember why we were created? Vorden asked. Perhaps Peter was going through something similar to Syl, and it was only thanks to us that Syl was able to cope with it all. Have some sympathy for Peter. Just then Peter started to move a little in his sleep, until eventually he opened up his eyes and slowly lifted the top half of his body off the ground. He touched his sides when he noticed he wasn't hurting as bad as before. I would move slowly if I were you, Vorden said. Most likely the robot injected some type of morphine or other painkillers into your body. You probably aren't feeling the pain right now, but the hurt is still there. Just lie down and rest for now. Peter did as he was told and laid back down on the floor. Looking at Vorden's awkward face, Peter couldn't tell what he was feeling and started to talk. I know you hate me, and you have every right to, but I feel like I need to get something off my chest, Peter said. Vorden continued to look away, avoiding eye contact. He wanted to seem disinterested even though he was interested in what Peter had to say. I didn't choose the school or the bullies over you two like you might be thinking. I chose my family over you two. You see, I have an older sister, or maybe I should say, I had an older sister. My family wasn't as rich as you can probably imagine, but they wanted us to have a good life. They saved up every little bit of credits they could, and they finally managed to purchase a level 3 ability book for my sister, just before sending her off to the military. She was the hope of our family, and they wanted her to become a decent traveler. But in her second year of military school, she died on an expedition. It was a big shock to us all, but it was an even bigger shock for my parents. It seemed like their life started spiraling down from there. There was no way they could afford another ability book for me. They told me not to worry, not to try and work hard like my sister for fear I would perish as well. But I wanted them to lead a better life, so when I came here I promised myself I would fill the shoes that my sister once had. The only option left for me was to take the Earth ability from the military and to try and level up by being loyal to the military. The only thing I didn't realize was the crazy things they would ask me to do. As Peter finished his story, he let out a sigh of relief. It felt like a weight was lifted from his shoulders. Sounds like you had a good family, Vorden said. You should have listened to them. What do you think would happen if you were to die? Trust me, they're a lot happier with you alive, no matter what living conditions they were in, rather than you being dead. Peter then lifted himself from the ground and looked at Vorden. I realized that, and that's why I said I'd pick my family over you guys. I didn't mind becoming a builder or something, as long as I would be able to support my family, but then they started targeting me, threatening me on this expedition. I knew what happened to my sister, so I thought the same thing would happen to me. Was it Earl and his underlings? Vorden asked. How do you know about Earl? Peter asked. I know what they had done to you, Peter. and trust me, they got what they deserved. I did a lot more than break their fingers, and they won't ever bother you again. Vorden said, while smiling. When Peter heard those words, there was a strange look in Vorden's eyes, combined with that creepy smile. It was sending a tingle down his spine, and all he wanted to do was to get as far away as possible from Vorden. Ah, yes, I still remember those screams. They were lovely. Ratton said to Vorden. No, I mean they were a part of it, but it was someone bigger, someone near the top. Vorden then went over and grabbed Peter by the shoulder. Who? Peter, tell me. Was it one of the teachers, or even one of the sergeants maybe? I saw them going into the second-year building, so I know it has to be someone from that department. Vorden wanted to make whoever was in charge pay for this. They had not only targeted him, but got others involved as well. He had heard that some military schools were bad, but clearly something was amiss in this one. It was different than his brother had described to him. Peter paused for a second as he was unsure whether he should tell Vorden or not. He knew the second he did, Vorden would be involved in this, but at the same time it was too hard going through everything alone. Vorden also scared him. He wasn't sure what to do. Vorden looked at him in a strange way. This made Peter feel scared and made him start to talk. It was... Before Peter could answer, screaming could be heard from outside. Vorden, Peter, Quinn, Layla shouted at the top of her lungs. The two of them immediately headed outside and could see Layla being carried by Aaron, who ice skated through the desert. When the two of them had finally reached their destination, Aaron collapsed into the sand and Layla had fallen off her back. Are you okay? Layla asked Aaron. I just used up all my power. I don't think I can help in the fight, Aaron said. Aaron had used up all her strength to get her and Layla out of there as fast as she could. She had managed to create quite the distance between them and the Dalki, but she knew she hadn't outrun the enemy. She could still consistently feel the pressure right behind her. When they looked over one of the sandhills, they could see a figure coming towards them. What happened? Are you running from the people who stole the crystals? Peter asked with a worried expression on his face. No, it's a Dalki, Layla said. The fear was written on her face. Chapter 130, Fighting the Dalki. Further in the desert, Quinn was plodding away in the loose sand, walking back towards the water well. Beads of sweat were dripping from his forehead. They landed in the sand and dried up faster than he could take a single step. Luckily, he hadn't gone too far away from the well. The problem was that he felt very weak, and he started to feel weaker by the minute. This made him move slower and slower. Perhaps bearing the sun's heat was not such a good idea, he thought. Even though his stats were better than those of a normal person, he actually felt weaker than a normal person would. The only reason he could think of to explain this was that the sun seemed to be stronger on this planet than it was on Earth and on the red portal planet where it was night for half the year. His MC points had now nearly fully recovered, and he couldn't wait to finally cast his shadow cloak. However, just before he could activate the skill, Quinn received a worrying message from the system. Long exposure to the sun has been confirmed. Your body has been weakened further. All stats will now be reduced by 80%. What is this? Quinn shouted. 80%. At that moment, Quinn had fallen on his knees as his whole body gradually started to feel weaker. Moreover, he started to feel a slight tingle on his skin. It felt as if the surface was burning, and now his skin was incredibly itchy nearly all over. What is happening to me? System, help, please explain. Quinn shouted to himself. You're a vampire now, the system replied. Don't you remember reading all those vampire fantasy books? Of course, if you stay outside and expose yourself to the sun for too long, there will be bad effects. What happens if I stay in the sun for too long? Quinn groaned with a worried look on his face. Well, your stats would continue to decrease further and further, until eventually, poof. The system said casually, as if this didn't bother the system at all, like it was of no consequence to it. Well, I can't take this any longer. I don't want to find out what poof means. Skill activated shadow cloak. The shadow at the bottom of his feet began to slowly surround him, traveling from the soles of his feet all the way to the top of his head. Eventually, he was like a blur of shadow under the radiance of the sun. He became like a human figure made out of shadows. While this skill is activated, it's hard for other people to spot him, and it worked best within the darkness or among the shadows. In the desert, however, it made him stick out like a sore thumb. Quinn felt his energy slowly returning back to normal, and now he could use his body like how he could do it normally. Stats have returned to normal. His MC points hadn't fully recovered. Quinn wasn't bothered about this. He was returning to the safety of his group. Aaron and Vorden could protect him until his MC points fully recovered. In the meantime, there was no need for him to use his abilities in battle. So, for now, he didn't worry about it too much and tried to catch up to the others as quickly as possible. A Dalki, are you sure? Vorden asked. However, before the others could even answer him, they suddenly saw a black figure flying in the sky. It was coming in their direction, landing right in the center of the well at an incredible speed. It crashed into the large metal machinery, causing it to break apart. Dust and sand kicked up everywhere, blocking the Dalki's landing place from view. When the specks of dust and dirt that arose started to settle, the Dalki standing right in the middle of the wreckage could be seen. What is this junk? The Dalki said as he lifted a piece of metal that had broken off. This is not a shelter. Then, the Dalki looked up at the people who had led him to this place. He could see 4 students standing in front of him. You should tell me where the shelter is now, the Dalki said, pointing to the piece of scrap metal besides Layla. Mama. She stammered. It's over the H there, she pointed, but she couldn't help but stutter her words as she was shivering in fear of the creature. Thank you, but I'm afraid no one can know that I was here. He then straightened the piece of metal in his hands with his claws. Then, using his fingertips, he sliced the top half of it to create a makeshift spear. I must not fail my mission, he said as he chucked the spear towards the students. Vorden immediately arrived in front of the group and conjured an ice barrier. No, that won't be enough, Aaron said while still lying on the ground. She then lifted her hand and helped Vorden cast another wall behind it, making it as thick as possible, using the last bits of her power. The makeshift spear crashed through the first ice barrier. It slowed it down slightly, but then it began to pierce through and hit the second wall. I need to help, Layla thought as she focused her mind, doing her best to slow down the spear's movements. Also, Peter rushed forward to where the ice wall was. Peter, what are you doing? Watch out. Vorden shouted. I can help too. Peter shouted back. Just behind a second ice wall, Peter placed both of his hands on the ground, and in that spot, a piece of earth started to slowly rise, eventually creating a third barrier. The spear continued to go through each of the 3 walls until its head poked through the earth wall. Then finally, the spear had stopped moving. Oh, looks like they've finally started to train you Earthlings a bit, I see. The Dalki said. Perhaps we need to start waging this war again before you Earthlings grow even stronger. Sil, we need your help now. Vorden said. No. Sil shouted back. If you don't, we will all die. You said you would take me to see Quinn. I don't even see any Quinn around here. Why would you lie to me? Are you lying to me like all the others? Sil asked. Just ignore the brat. Ratton said. Let me take over. We don't have time. Vorden immediately left the chair and allowed Ratton to take over. The Dalki then rushed forward, and at that moment, Ratton placed both of his hands on the ground and a trail of ice materialized, heading straight for the Dalki's feet. Hey, ugly. Ratton shouted at the Dalki in an attempt to provoke it. When that ugly thing stops moving, fire all the arrows you have at it. He shouted to Layla. Although Layla didn't like the sudden change of tone in Vorden's voice, she didn't have time to complain. The trail of ice eventually reached the Dalki's feet. However, it didn't even slow the creature down for a second. As the ice touched its feet, it continued to run forward, breaking the ice with sheer power. Layla didn't know what else to do, so she fired an arrow at it anyway. She tried to change the direction of the arrow with her powers to make it unpredictable, but it seemed like the Dalki was paying no attention to her at all. In the end, she aimed the arrow to go directly into the Dalki's thigh. However, the arrow simply bounced off, not even leaving a scratch on it. All Layla had was some standard steel arrows that were only as hard as regular bullets. It seemed that she would at least need beast arrows to inflict a wound on a Dalki. Damn it, Ratton shouted. Let's have some lizard barbecue. Using both of his palms, he fired a huge stream of fire towards the lizard. Utilizing both of the abilities together, the flames grew large and larger until they covered the whole area where the Dalki was. They couldn't hear any more footsteps from inside the blazing fire. Because of this, the group thought that the attack was a success. But then, the intensity of the flames started to decrease at an alarming rate, as if they were being sucked away by something. All of the flames were flowing towards the Dalki like it was a vacuum, traveling in one stream directly towards the Dalki's mouth. Thank you for the meal, it said. I haven't had anything this tasty in years. It's hopeless, Aaron said. It's too strong. We're all going to die. Aaron was shaking in fear the same way as she was shaking earlier, and even Vorden had a concerned look on his face. Skill activated Shadow Void. The area around them started to be encased in a dark shadow. The group looked confused as they had no idea what was going on. Is this the Dalki's power? Layla asked. No, I've never heard of something like this. The Dalki himself was equally confused like them. Just what was it that was surrounding the entire area with them in it? Chapter 131, The Perfect Counter. The black shadow started to surround all of them. It slowly encased the group until finally, the whole area around them was filled with purple shadows. Damn it, we're all going to die, Layla said. But then Aaron noticed that the Dalki was also looking around in confusion at the shadows, as if it was something unknown to it. No, look, it seems like the Dalki is just as confused as we are. That's probably why it's not attacking us right now. It wasn't unusual for someone to be afraid of the unknown, and right now, the Dalki was seeing something it had never seen before. It got into a crouching position and was prepared for whatever was to come. Its senses were telling it something was in the shadows with them, something other than the 4 in front of it. Then from behind a claw-like shape of red lines came flying towards the Dalki. It turned around. Sensing the power in the attack, it lifted both of its arms to protect itself, and it placed its arms in an X shape right in front of its face. The lines of power had hit it, but the attack hadn't done much damage. Just as it was about to look up, for more the same attack came at it. It quickly held up its hands. It was strongly relying on its hard skin to block the attacks. Although the attacks didn't hurt the Dalki, for the first time in a long while, it had been pushed back from its position by an attack. When it pulled its arms down, it was surprised to see what looked like another student standing in front of it. Oh, so it was you? It said. It was a young Dalki who had only met a few adult humans on its journey, but not a single one had given him any trouble or managed to even make him move back with their strongest attacks. The same could be said for any beast that had attacked the Dalki. But here on this safe little planet, it had encountered a young human who had done just that. As soon as Quinn had released his first attack, his shadow cloak had disappeared, and this had revealed him to everyone. The problem was he was low on MC points. He had 90 when he first used the shadow cloak. By the time he had arrived, he only had 80 MC points left. Then when he had cast the Shadow Void skill, it meant he only had 30 of his MC points left, and he needed to use them wisely. He had also used Shadow Equip to put his equipment on his hands and feet. Is that Quinn? Peter shouted. What's with this power? I don't understand. Then Aaron spotted that Quinn's watch. To her surprise, it currently displayed the number 6. His ability requires more MC than mine. Does this mean the shadow circle his doing? Was he hiding his strength this whole time? She shouted. He must have had his reasons, Layla said. But right now, he's going up against an enemy I think even he can't deal with. Layla didn't know what to do. At this point, her arrows were useless and couldn't even be used as a distraction because the Dalki would just ignore them. Aaron had run out of MC, and Peter was far too weak to be of any use. So right now, the only one that could help them was Vorden. Please, help Quinn, Layla begged. You two have to fight it together. Vorden wasn't the one in control, but Ratton was. How is the little one doing? Ratton asked. He is still sleeping, Vorden replied. So, it looks like I'll have to deal with this one. Ratton said. The Dalki then went and picked up another piece of scrap metal from the ground that was part of the well's machinery. Although the roof and area were covered in shadows, the same couldn't be said for the ground. The crumbled building and the broken metal pieces remained scattered everywhere. After picking up a piece of metal, it used its claws to once again turn the metal into a spear. I'm assuming I can't get out of this bubble that you created, so I can't run away. The Dalki said. Otherwise, why would you waste so much of your power creating it? Of course, the Dalki doesn't know about Quinn's problem with sunlight. Actually, the sole purpose for Quinn to block out the sun is so he can fight at his full power. Let's see how strong you really are, the Dalki shouted, as he chucked the spear-like object towards Quinn. It went lightning fast, and was similar to the one that required all four of the others to block before. No, there's no way he can block that on his own. Layla said. We have to help, she shouted. Peter stayed by Aaron's side while Vorden and Layla rushed towards Quinn, but the spear was going too fast, and they hadn't been able to take a single step before the spear reached Quinn. Shadow control. Using his shadow control skill, Quinn was able to create a black circular shield. That won't be strong enough, Aaron said, looking up from the ground. It took all four of us to stop it before. Why doesn't he try to dodge it? But for Vorden, seeing Quinn's action made something click in his head. The spear flew, going at lightning speed until the tip had touched the black circular shadow. At that moment, the spear looked like it had stopped in midair. However, Quinn and Vorden knew that it was only moving ever so slowly through the shadow. Once the spear slowed, Quinn moved to the side. He took the shadow away and allowed the spear to continue moving forward and out of the shadow void. This is perfect, Vorden said. Quinn's shadow ability was nearly a perfect counter to the Dalki. The enormous amount of strength meant nothing. No matter how powerful the attack was, it would be slowed down because Quinn's shadows blocked attacks in a different way from how other abilities did. In a way, Quinn as a vampire was the perfect counter to the Dalki. Vorden continued to run forward while Layla took cover somewhere off to the side. It was clear that for the moment the Dalki was stunned by what he had just seen, and this was their chance. Vorden threw an ice spear at the Dalki. It shattered into a million pieces once it hit the Dalki's body. However, it did catch the Dalki's attention, which was what Vorden was aiming for. Knowing the Dalki was able to eat fire, it left Vorden only with two options, to use ice and telekinesis to fight the Dalki. You are boring, the Dalki said. I'm far more interested in that one. Ignoring Vorden's weak attacks, it dashed straight forward heading for Quinn. Seeing this, even if Quinn was to use the wind walk ability on his boots, he wouldn't be able to outrun the Dalki. The only thing he could do was fight, but what could he use? The blood swipe, although powerful, did no damage, which was problematic. Hey, brat! Vorden shouted. Its skin is too tough. Use an attack that can hurt it on the inside. On the inside? Quinn thought. He now knew exactly what to do. When the Dalki was a few meters away, it leapt up into the air with its claws out and with both of its hands above its head, ready to smash down. Quinn quickly placed the shadow above himself, allowing both of its fists to sink into the shadow. MC 20 out of 100. The Dalki could feel its attack slowing down as soon as it touched the strange shadow-like substance, but by using its considerable strength, it was able to pull its hands from the shadow. The problem was with every physical attack, Quinn would lose MC points. He needed to finish this fight fast. The Dalki was quick on its feet and didn't allow its first unsuccessful attack to distract it. It threw out a straight kick at Quinn, and once again Quinn stopped it with his shadow shield. MC 10/100. His attacks are so strong, I can only take one more. Quinn thought. Quinn needed an opening, and just defending wasn't going to do it. The next thing he was going to do was very risky, but it was the only option he had. As the Dalki threw another punch towards him, Quinn moved the shadow and wrapped it around the Dalki's fist. MC 0/100. The shadow void started to disappear, and Quinn only had a few more seconds before the sunlight would hit him. Quinn could see the Dalki's other hand coming straight at him. He looked the Dalki in the eyes. Skill days. Even though the Dalki was a strong opponent, and the skill was likely to fail, there was always a slim chance that it might work. Days successful. Your opponent has been stunned. But for Quinn's next move, he would need more time than the days would allow. He flash stepped behind the Dalki and prepared all the motions for the hammer strike. As he finished his movements, he added blood spray to the last part, turning it into the most powerful attack he had, Blood Hammer. As Quinn's fist hit the Dalki's hard back, vibrations and a wave of air had been sent out from around the two of them. The Dalki still hadn't moved from his spot, but after a few seconds, he fell down on one knee. This was Quinn's answer, an internal attack. You are being hit by sunlight. All stats have been reduced by 70%. When Quinn thought everything was over, a large fist had come out of nowhere, swinging out, and hit him right in the ribs, sending him flying through the air. Critical hit. Your ribs have been broken. 12/65 HP remaining. The Dalki stood up on the ground and smiled, wiping away the green blood from its mouth. I'm not done with you yet, boy. Chapter 132 Blood Bowl. My Vampire System, Chapter 132. For a moment, everyone's morale was increased. For the first time, they had a glimmer of hope again when they saw the mighty Dalki fall to the ground. They didn't know why Quinn was so powerful or why he was hiding it before, and frankly they didn't care because all of them only had one thought on their mind. I want to live. After seeing that powerful attack from Quinn, they felt that they might survive this after all, but that happy feeling didn't last for long. A few seconds after the Dalki had fallen to the ground, it sent Quinn flying with a single swing of its fist. Quinn was flying right into the other building, the one that was still intact. As Quinn hit the building, his body crashed through the wall, and he fell to the floor. Is he okay? Peter shouted. That guy can take a lot more hurt than that, Vorden said. Trust me, I know from experience. Something like that isn't enough to kill him. Layla looked at the sky. She immediately realized there was something else they needed to be concerned about. As long as Quinn had a steady supply of blood, he would be fine, but right now, something was holding him back from using his full powers, of course. She meant the sun. Now she realized why Quinn had cast a shadow surrounding them all, and how he was able to fight so well even though the sun was still up. Looking at the sky, she noticed that it was finally starting to set. The colors were fading from its bright yellow to orange. It would only be a matter of time before it would finally be night on this planet. We need to get a Quinn, she shouted to the others. However, her cries were useless. No one moved forward, including her. She wanted to go in and help him, but stepping in against such a powerful foe was like committing suicide. Now, that was impressive, the Dalki said with a smile on its face. Its teeth were now on full display. They were a little strange compared to regular human teeth. It looked like those of a crocodile. Each tooth was razor sharp, and they overlaid one another. I heard there was something called martial arts the Earthlings use. I never believed it could be something useful, until just now. You actually managed to bypass my hard skin and hurt me from the inside. As the Dalki began to walk over to where Quinn was, something strange was happening on its back. The single spike on its back started to pulsate and glow with a slight blue color. Did you know, the more a Dalki gets hurt, the stronger they get? It said with an evil grin on its face. The others could tell that it wasn't bluffing. They could feel a strange energy coming off its body every time the spike on its back would light up. When the Dalki tried to take another step forward, it felt something akin to a force field that was pulling him back and slowing him down. This made its movements felt incredibly sluggish. Is it coming from the kid from earlier? But that's impossible, he hasn't moved since he tried those ice spears. The Dalki thought. Crazy boy, Layla yelled, looking at Vorden with both of his hands stretched out. What is this ugly dinosaur trying to do? In the black room inside Vorden's mind, both Vorden and Ratton were no longer in the seat. Syl had taken over. Are you trying to take one away from me? He yelled. The Dalki then turned its head, slowly using its strength, and saw Vorden standing there. The boy from earlier, but how did he get so strong? He wasn't like this before. You Earthlings are nothing like we were told, and you're not even adults, you're just students, the Dalki said. The whole situation was filling the battle-crazy Dalki with happiness. The others were amazed at how powerful Vorden's telekinesis powers were right now. But this was because he was using all the MC points from his other abilities and had it all focused inside the telekinesis ability. At that moment, Quinn was just lifting himself off the ground. He was so badly hurt he had no choice but to use his blood bank. 100 millimeters of blood used. 50 HP has been restored. 63 out of 65. Blood bank is now empty. As soon as the blood was consumed, his body started to heal almost instantly. The healing was much faster than when he allowed his body to heal on its own accord. But there was another problem. The ceiling of the building he was in had collapsed. It was letting the sun in, and it was hitting him right now, making his movements extremely sluggish and decreasing his power. Vorden, how long do you think you can hold him? Layla asked, but Syl didn't reply. His own name wasn't being used, and he didn't talk to strangers much in the first place. However, as powerful as Syl was, he was unable to completely stop the Dalki's movements. It continued to use its brute strength to power through the telekinetic field and was now walking towards them. At the same time, she saw Quinn lifting himself off the ground and the sun continuing to set behind him. Even if it turns to night, how is Quinn going to be able to fight such a thing? It's just too strong, Layla thought. Then she seemed to recall something Quinn had told her in the past, that he seemed to get stronger with each person's blood he drank. Layla didn't know the exact details, but anything they could do to tip the scales in their favor, she would be happy to do right now. She knelt down to Aaron's side and asked her for a favor. Aaron, I know you're weak right now, but do you think you can make a bowl of ice for me? I know it sounds weird, but you need to trust me. Aaron's was completely exhausted. You could see it in her face. It clearly wasn't just from using her abilities. The whole scenario was affecting her mentally as well. She didn't reply back to Layla, but lifted both hands, and ice started to form, eventually creating a small bowl of ice. The next thing Layla did, she didn't even bother asking for Aaron's permission. She grabbed one of the arrows from her quiver and used the tip to make a small cut on the palm of Aaron's hands. The strangest thing was that Aaron gave no reaction whatsoever, which proved that something was seriously wrong with her. Then, using the bowl of ice, she allowed for the blood to drip into it. Once there was a good amount of blood, she continued to do the same, using her own blood. Next up was Peter. I have no time to explain, Peter, but if you want to live, let me do this, Layla said with a strange look on her face. Peter had no intentions of going against her order and allowed for his blood to be put into the bowl as well. The Dalki was continuing to move towards them, and the sweat was running down Syl's face. This stupid dinosaur is strong, Syl said to Vorden and Ratton. We know, but don't give up, just a little longer. Vorden shouted, just hold on until the sun goes down. Syl, think of everything that ever annoyed you. Pretend it's that stupid thing's fault. Ratton cheered. The words of encouragement from the two empowered Syl to continue fighting, and he was doing his best to hold the Dalki back. Suddenly, Layla appeared by his side. I know you're busy keeping the Dalki at bay, but I need your help, it's for Quinn, she said. The bowl was almost full. Layla didn't know how it worked or how much she needed, but she had to do something. Using the arrow, she created a small cut on the back of Vorden's leg, allowing it to slowly seep into the bowl. When the bowl was finally full, she started to make her way towards Quinn. Just what is that girl doing? The Dalki thought, but for now, it would have to ignore her. Right now, he had a bigger pain in the backside. It was the boy who was controlling his movements. Quinn, are you alright? Layla asked as she came rushing over. Yeah, I'm fine. I was just waiting for the sun to go down. I'm not much use while the sun is out, but it looks like Vorden managed to delay him. Quinn answered. They both looked at the sun and the faint bit of light that was left. As the sun continued to go down, strength was returning to Quinn's body. Here, drink this, Layla said as she handed over the bowl full of blood. What is it? Quinn asked. It's all of our blood. I thought it could help you in some way, said Layla. Quinn had yet to drink the blood from Vorden, Aaron, or Peter, so right now the blood would give him 3 extra stat points. He was unsure in what, but right now he needed everything he could get to turn the tide. He took the bowl and gulped it down in one go. 65/65 HP. Blood bank has been filled. 2 points have been added into agility. 1 free stat point has been added. A row of messages had appeared, giving Quinn a smile on his face, but the last one was the best of them all. You are no longer affected by sunlight. All stats have returned to normal. Chapter 133 Shadow Blood. After consuming the blood in the bowl, Quinn felt like a new person. His blood bank was filled, and his whole body was now fully healed. But best of all, the sun had finally disappeared behind the horizon, and it was now nighttime. I can't hold on any longer. I'm too tired, Sil whined. The struggle against the Dalki was too much for him. He wasn't fighting obsessed like Ratton, so he gave up control and left Vorden in charge once again. Vorden was the weakest of the three and only knew how to use one mind and one ability at a time. As soon as he and Sil had switched places, the pressure that the Dalki felt was immensely weakened. The Dalki could suddenly move one foot in front of the other again. The amount of force it felt being exerted on itself was like nothing compared to before. I thought this one was special, but looks like all he could do was delay me a bit. The Dalki thought. Quinn, seeing this happen, knew he was in trouble. He had gained 2 agility points, bringing it up to 18, and then with the boots this made 22. Seeing the Dalki head towards Vorden, Quinn felt like he had to quickly decide what to do with his free stat point. He put the free stat point into agility without hesitation. It now brought his agility stat up to a total of 23. Then using all the speed he could and activating his boots windwalk ability, he rushed over to where the Dalki was. Regardless if Vorden was in trouble or not right now, he would have put his points into agility. The Dalki's strength was too great for Quinn to match, and although it was fast, it wasn't faster than Quinn. He could follow its movements. With the extra stat points and his boots active, he would be able to dodge the Dalki's attacks, although just barely. Moving at an incredible speed, Quinn managed to cover the distance from the building to where the others were in only a few seconds. As soon as he was in range, he cast another blood swipe. The attack ripped through the sand and was heading straight for his target. The Dalki pulled his head back at the last second, and the attack skimmed right past its nose. It turned its head and looked at Quinn, seeing that the boy was in perfect condition. But how is this possible? I'm certain you should be on death's door by now, the Dalki said. At the same time, Vorden had collapsed onto the floor. All of his energy and MC points had been used. It's up to you now, Quinn, he said. Good luck. The Dalki charged towards him, and as it did, Quinn could feel the blood and adrenaline rushing through his entire body. He was in a state of absolute concentration as he waited for the Dalki's attack. A swing was made for his head. Quinn ducked down and threw out a punch, performing blood spray at the same time, taking advantage of the close range. The attack managed to push the Dalki back a few steps away from him. 48/65 HP. What's he doing? Aaron asked. His attacks are too weak. He's not hurting the thing at all. Why doesn't he use the same attack as before? I think he's stalling for something, Vorden replied, now sitting on the floor with the others. But for what? I have no idea. Quinn had to be absolutely sure not to get a hit from the Dalki. Not only were his attacks crazy powerful, but if he got even a tiny scratch on him, the ability from the boots he was wearing would deactivate, which would slow him down a lot. But after dodging for a while, his boots had deactivated anyway, as the skill time then wore off. Another claw was coming at him, and it looked like he was about to get hit. He had no choice but to perform the flash step and appear directly behind the Dalki. Damn, I can only use the flash step one more time. Any more and I'll get worn out, Quinn thought. But the Dalki was getting equally frustrated. You little Keenan, I will squash you. It lifted up both fists and smashed them into the ground, causing a crater to form and rubble to lift off the ground. It didn't seem like an attack made to hurt anyone. The rocks just lifted into the air and quickly fell back to the floor. It was actually just a way for it to let out a bit of frustration. At the same time, it had another effect on everyone. It once again showed the might of the Dalki. Quinn had taken a few steps back away from the Dalki and quickly opened up a status screen. MC points 40 out of 100. This was what Quinn was waiting for. He was waiting for his MC points to return so he could use the shadow ability again. Since it was nighttime, there was no need for him to use the shadow void skill. Unfortunately, though, while the skill was active, his MC points would not return. This whole time Quinn was doing his best to dodge, focusing all his energy into avoiding the Dalki's attacks, waiting for the right moment. Now he could finally use his shadow abilities once again. In truth, he wanted to stall a bit longer to gain more of his MC points back, but continuously dodging was getting far too risky. When the Dalki looked up, it was surprised to see that Quinn was the one coming towards it. So you finally decided to attack, I see, it shouted. Quinn flung his hand out with his fingers held together, casting a single red line of aura. Then before it could move away from him, the shadow underneath his feet started to move. The shadow reached out and grabbed the blood aura, holding it in place, and now the other end of the shadow was attached to Quinn's hand. To the others, it looked like Quinn was wielding a large red and black scythe. The black shadows reached into his hand, while the curved blood aura acted as the blade held tight by the shadow. The two opponents were still quite a distance away from each other, but Quinn still swung out the shadow scythe. Seeing this, the Dalki wasn't afraid. It was slightly confused, actually, as the scythe wouldn't be able to reach him. Suddenly, as the scythe was swung outwards, it seemed like it was starting to extend. As Quinn swung it to his side, the shadows extended, and the red aura part managed to hit the Dalki right on its side. It was pushed back a few feet, and at the same time could feel a stinging pain. When he looked down, he could see a large cut had appeared where his ribs were, and green blood was starting to leak from the wound. This was what Quinn had been practicing the whole week in Logan's room. A way to combine his shadow skills while also using his blood skills, and after countless trials and errors, this was what he had come up with. Chapter 134, A Sacrifice. With Quinn's new attack, combining his shadow control with a blood swipe, had hit the Dalki's body. It had shattered and disappeared, just as his normal blood swipe would. 47/65 HP. 35 out of 100 MC. Combining his shadow skills with his blood skills allowed him to create a more powerful combination skill. Connecting the shadow to his blood swipe allowed him to also add his own strength to the power of the blood swipe. The shadow made it possible for the attack to be flexible, moving it about freely. This would also add extra force and momentum into the attack, making it more powerful and increasing the range of the attack beyond the 5 meters that was blood swipe's natural limit. There were only two problems Quinn still had to find a solution for. If the shadow holding the blood swipe was hit, or if he wasn't fast enough, the blood swipe would escape from the shadow's grasp. The other problem is that when the attack hit, it would disappear, so he could only use it once. Of course, using the shadow for an attack also used him C points, but there was nothing he could about that. The Dalki's blood continued to drip from its side and fall into the sand, but now the spike on its back was pulsating faster and glowing brighter. Seeing the Dalki injured and bleeding made Quinn feel excited. He charged forward once again. "Come on, attack me again," the Dalki shouted. And Quinn did just that, this time casting a blood swipe up in the air before grabbing it with his shadow. He then swung it from above right down on top of the Dalki. The attack was faster than the Dalki had predicted. It could only barely get its arms up in time to block the attack that came at it from above. The attack was a success and had caused the Dalki to fall onto the ground. Its forearms were dripping with green blood, but it ignored its wounds. It just stood up once again and charged forward. "Is that Dalki an idiot?" Layla thought. "I had always heard they were smart. Some minds even greater than ours, but why does it just keep running forward?" At this point, even Quinn was starting to worry. His attacks were clearly working, but the Dalki was acting in a strange way. For now, there was nothing he could do about it. He went to attack once again with his shadow scythe. Only this time the Dalki managed to jump and avoid the blow. "Did it just get faster?" Quinn said. "You seem to have forgotten." The Dalki said, "I told you already, the more we are hurt, the stronger we become." The Dalki made a fist above its head and threw it down towards Quinn's face. Quinn had no choice but to move his shadow to block the fist attack, but the Dalki immediately used a kick to his side, which was too fast for him to be able to move the shadow to defend against. The attack hit, and he was thrown to the side. His ribs were broken once again. 365 HP. Blood Bank has automatically been activated. 53 out of 65 HP. While in mid-air, Quinn's body started to heal, and his bones went back into place. Putting both his hands in the sand, he tried his best to slow himself down and eventually came to a halt. "I can't win," Quinn said. "Even with my full power, it's still too strong." "Snap out of it, Quinn." The system shouted in his head. "You only became a vampire a couple of weeks ago, and you think you can already take out an enemy like this. You will grow in due time, but the important thing right now is to survive." But how was he meant to survive? His blood bank had been used up. The only answer he could think of was he needed more blood. If he could get to where the others were, and he filled up his blood bank, maybe he could keep firing out his blood attacks till the thing died. The cooldown on his boots had reset, and once again, he could use the wind walk skill. He rushed towards the Dalki who was coming toward him. As it did, Quinn could see the big smile on its face as if it was enjoying the fight. He also noticed the horror on the faces of the others. "I could do this. I have to do this," Quinn shouted. Running forward and not changing his direction, he went straight ahead. Then just as the Dalki was prepared to attack, flash step, he used his skill, allowing him to avoid the strike and go right past the Dalki. He continued to run straight ahead and was heading for the others. During the fight between the Dalki and Quinn, Layla made her way around the fight and joined with the other three. All of them were watching within silence, with awe on their faces. "What is he doing?" Layla thought. "Should we run? Is that why he's coming towards us?" "I need blood," Quinn yelled. "I can't fight the Dalki like this. I need more blood." Layla didn't ask any questions and immediately started to make another cut on the palm of her hand, and Aaron had already formed another ice bowl. Aaron didn't know what was happening, but whatever Layla had done last time had made Quinn stronger, and Quinn was now their only change to survive. But when they all looked up, their faces had dropped entirely, for the Dalki was already right behind Quinn. Not only had its strength gotten higher, but so had its speed. Everything about the Dalki had improved. It was too late for Quinn to notice, and the Dalki was already mid-attack. Quinn had never suspected the Dalki would grow so much during the battle, but it seemed like what it had said earlier was true. The fist flew forward and penetrated right through flesh and bone, going straight through his body and out to the other side. At this point, Quinn had finally noticed that the Dalki was right behind him. He was too focused on obtaining the blood Layla had gathered. He had failed to realize what was happening behind him. Bright red blood could be seen dripping onto the ground with a fist through his body. But it wasn't Quinn's body that was penetrated. The person who had been hit was Peter. "Quinn," Peter said weakly, coughing out blood that filled his mouth. "Please forgive me." His body fell to the ground and hit the soft sand. His blood continued to soak the sand, turning it red. In a moment Quinn needed help the most, the only one brave enough to step up and come to Quinn's side was Peter. However, it came at a terrible price. Chapter 135 Blood Ritual. As Quinn saw Peter's body hit the ground, a certain reality had hit him. He had seen people die before. In fact, he was even the case of many. But this was the first time that someone he knew personally had died. But what upset Quinn more than anything, instead of what happened to Peter, was another thought altogether. This thought was, look at all that wasted blood. Fortunately, though, that quickly changed as he soon realized what had occurred. "Peter," he shouted. "When did he get over there?" Layla asked after hearing Quinn shout. "I was too busy looking at Quinn, waiting for him back here." Aaron replied to her question. "The same goes for me. He must have started moving towards Quinn as soon as he saw the Dalki," Borden said. "But why did this happen after what we were just talking about? You had a family that cared for you." The Dalki looked at Peter on the floor. "That's quite noble of you. A society should build itself on sacrificing the weak ones to preserve the strong. That's exactly how the Dalki does it. He was selfless, and his sacrifice allowed the stronger human genes to be passed on. It's a shame, though, since you will all be dying with him." This was it, Quinn thought. As the Dalki came closer to him, he had run out of trump cards. His MC had been used, and all he had left was his original skills. "I'll kill you," Quinn shouted, "even if it means killing myself." Opening both palms, Quinn soon ran forward. When he felt that he was close enough, he shot out a blood spray from one hand. The Dalki would slightly flinch in response to this, as his foot shifted back a little. 48/65 HP. Usually, these attacks wouldn't inflict any damage. But although he got stronger the more he was hurt, that didn't mean his defense increased. He had been quite severely damaged by Quinn's shadow side attacks. Another spray of blood fired out again. 43/65 HP. Quinn wouldn't let up and rapidly fired out multiple blood sprays. Hey, it seems to be working, Layla shouted out. But in contrast to Layla's words, Vorden wasn't too sure. He didn't know how Quinn's attacks worked, for he hadn't told the two. Also, he wasn't sure if he was imagining things or not, but every time Quinn used that attack, his face seemed to grow paler. 38/65 HP. 33/65 HP. I'll kill you, Quinn shouted. And once I'm done with you, I'll suck out your blood until you're nothing but a walking skeleton. He continued to shout out words of abuse, but he himself wasn't really sure what he was saying. Fortunately, a nice surprise came to him amidst his combat. Blood spray has leveled up. Blood spray is now LVL 2. As Quinn shot out the new and improved blood spray, the power seemed to push his arm back even more as the spray's range grew further as well. As it hit the Dalki this time, its wounds seemed to be opening up as more green blood was leaking out of it than before. 28/65 HP. 23/65 HP. Now that the two of them were a distance away, the group ran up on Peter to check up on him. They then moved his body and allowed him to lay on his back. Surprisingly, even though he had such a big wound, he was still breathing. What do we do? Layla cried out. He'll bleed to death like this. Can't we use the robot? No, the robot wasn't meant to patch up injuries like this, Aaron replied. It might be best if we kill him here, Vorden said all of a sudden. The two girls looked at Vorden with expressions of shock. They couldn't believe what they had just heard. Look, I know what Peter did against you two was wrong, but can't you just forgive him? Layla shouted back in response to Vorden's words. Vorden shook his head as a reply. You're mistaken, Layla. I already forgave Peter a while ago. I'm just saying this for his sake, he soon said. Look at him, he's in pain. He's been bleeding for the last 2 minutes, and, at most, he only has another 3 before he's completely gone. It'll be more peaceful to get rid of him now. But the group didn't have time to decide, for they were distracted by something else. Whenever Quinn would use the blood spray, a sound similar to a small shotgun would be heard, but the sound had suddenly stopped. When they looked over, they saw Quinn kneeling down on one knee, while the Dalki was still standing, but green blood was oozing from the multiple wounds on his body. Quinn hadn't paid much attention to it, but he had unfortunately run out of stamina. With the increase of firepower in the blood spray, it also took up more energy to use it. Right now, it seemed that he had overexerted himself. Sweat was dripping all over his body, while all of his muscles cramped up. He looked at the Dalki that was still standing, unbelieving that it was still alive after it had received so much damage. The Dalki soon started walking over while Quinn looked at it directly in the eyes. Daze skill ineffective. And just like that, the last thing he could do had been tossed out the window. Damn it, if Peter can go forward, then at least I can as well. Vorden shouted all of a sudden as he charged in with what little power he had left, but all of a sudden, a large metallic object went flying right by Vorden's head, landing directly between Quinn and the Dalki. You kids get back. Get out of here now. That's an order. This sound echoed from the object that just landed, and all of them found out what it was straight away. It was a mech. Quickly soon after, another mech had landed right next to that one. It did not take for the Dalki and the mechs to be engaged in combat after that. The mechs had humongous strength and were equivalent to that of the Dalki they were currently facing. The only problem was they were still clunky and not as agile, but the others noticed that it would take a while before the Dalki was able to destroy them. Come, Queen, Vorden yelled, putting Peter on top of his shoulder. Let's get out of here. And with that, the two of them went over to where the others were by Peter's side. Right now, his face was much paler than before, and not to mention, his eyelids were drooping as well. Quinn knelt down by his side and looked at him in the eyes. I'm sorry, Peter. You saved me. There were no tears in his eyes like the others, but there was a hint of melancholy in his voice. But then, just as he said these words, a voice was heard from the system. If you wish to save him, you must act quickly, the system said. I can save him, but these wounds are impossible to heal with no healer around. That is indeed the case, but if he was no longer human and a supply of blood from each of you, he would be able to overcome this fatal wound. As long as his heart and the core of his brain is not damaged, then he will live. You have the choice, but you have to decide fast whether to do so or not. Would you like to activate the blood ritual? Chapter 136, Cursed Family. The system had given him an option at the most crucial time whether to make Peter into a blooded one or not. If the system had just asked him out of the blue, then Quinn probably would have said no. Peter had betrayed them, and although he might not do it again, there was no way to be sure. He would have much rather blooded Layla or Vorden when the time was right. The two of them had done nothing but help him out during these times. But right now, it wasn't about loyalty, it wasn't about what was right or wrong, but about whether or not Quinn wanted to save his life. Surely becoming a vampire was better than dying, right? I'll do it, Quinn said. Yes. After confirming he wanted to make Peter into a blooded one, a new screen had appeared in front of his face, one that had given him detailed instructions. Quinn, what's up with your eyes? Layla asked. Quinn didn't know it himself, but as soon as he had accepted to activate the skill of his blood ritual, his eyes started to glow. Faint red circles were seen around the iris, similar to when he activated his influence skill. Right after, he started to follow the instructions one by one. Please proceed by inserting the host's blood into the mouth of the target. Quinn unequipped his equipment and placed it back into the dimensional space. Then, using one of the tips of Layla's arrow, he inflicted a cut on his hand, creating a brand new wound. He held his hand just above Peter's mouth, who was now barely breathing, and allowed for the blood to drip in. It touched the tip of his mouth, slowly started to fall inside his body. His fingers that were once unmoving now started to twitch, and a warm feeling had started in his body. Inside, the blood cells from Quinn's could be seen latching onto the blood cells of Peter's, and slowly, they were all starting to change throughout his body. Peter's eyes then opened wide, and now he had red rings around his eyes. Quinn couldn't quite explain it, but for a moment, he could feel a connection with Peter and could see what was happening inside his body. Quinn, this isn't enough. The transformation has only just begun, but he now needs the blood of the others to live. The system shouted. Guys, please, I need you all to do the same, Quinn asked. Just then, Peter's body started shaking uncontrollably. His wounds still hadn't healed, but he was moving as if he was back alive once again. Quinn quickly grabbed both his hands. Someone hold his mouth open, Quinn shouted. Vorden quickly moved to the top of Peter's head and held his mouth open wide. It was a struggle as Peter swung his head left and right. What's happening to him, Quinn? It's like he's turned into a crazy beast. Just as he said those words, he started to realize what was happening. The look on Quinn's face said it all. Quinn was going to save his life by turning him into a vampire. The others did as instructed, and each one squeezed out the blood from the previous wound they had made before, reopening them. Finally, a result. The wound around Peter's stomach started to heal as his cells slowly patched them together. It was at a speed unseen unless one was to use a healing ability. What magic is this? Aaron said out loud. But the other two had a concerned look on their face as they knew exactly what was happening. Peter started to struggle less until he eventually calmed down and his eyes were finally closed. Is he still alive? Layla asked. Vorden then placed his head onto Peter's chest, and for a while, a heartbeat wasn't heard, but then ever so faintly he could hear a beat. I think so, Vorden said, half confused. Then when checking his breath, they realized he was indeed still alive. At that moment, Quinn received another message. The ritual was a success. The human has successfully been blooded one half. A vampire ghoul has been created. A new family has been created. What would you like to name your family? When seeing the notifications, there was a couple of things that had surprised him, and Quinn wanted immediate answers. But the first thing he needed to do was get rid of the screen in his face, which wanted him to name his family. Family. Now that you have turned someone, he falls under your ranks, he has your blood, so he's a part of your family. Every vampire that turns someone has the responsibility to look after their family. The system explained. Right now, Quinn could only think of one thing. Although he had gotten stronger thanks to the ability, he now relied on one thing, blood. Without it, he didn't know how he would survive. If he went 2 days without a human by his side, then what would he do? He couldn't eat the blood of beasts or animals. And if he started fighting using his blood abilities, it would only cause him to rely on it even more. Family name, the Cursed. This was how Quinn felt at this moment in time. Just then a loud crash was heard. As the group turned their head, they could see a Dalki on top of one of the mechs ripping off one of its arms. It was covered in more blood than before, and it no longer looked human, but just that of a pure beast. Well, looks like we lucked out, and it's only a single spike. A voice was heard from behind the group of students, and when they turned to look, they could see Leo standing there. Although he didn't look like his ordinary self. Usually he would be wearing his military uniform and have his katana by his side. But right now, he had a light set of black and red beast gear on, and his chest had the design of a Japanese demon, an Oni with horns. There will be no need to call the others, or use my soul weapon for something like this. Chapter 137 Green Blood. At the second military base, inside one of the schools, another meeting was taking place. Once again, the head general wasn't present, leaving Nathan and Duke to deal with things. There's been a report of a Dalki ship crash landing on the planet Kaladi, Nathan reported. At that moment, the first-year sergeants had expressions of shock on their faces. Don't worry, it seems to be a stray ship from somewhere. The tower made communications with the Dalki, and of course, they said it was a member who had gone rogue. Damn those Dalki, Duke yelled, slamming the table. Every year, they keep pushing and pushing into our territory. Luckily, it only seems to be a single ship, so at most, there'll be 2 there. Of course, the tower has asked us to send. Before Nathan could even finish his sentence, Leo stood up from his seat and bowed down in front of Nathan. Please allow me to go. Those students are too young to experience something like this, especially on their first outing. They must be protected. Nathan was quite shocked to see Leo suddenly volunteering. Usually, when something like this occurred, no one would willingly go and risk their lives against the Dalki. Hearing this made Nathan wonder if the rumors were actually true. That for some reason, Leo had a stronger grudge against the Dalki than most people. Or perhaps, he just really cared about the students. One thing was for sure though, he was sure that if they were to send Leo out, then there would be no need to send out any of the other teachers or sergeants. As long as the Dalki had no more than 3 spikes, then Nathan was confident in him. Well, I guess the matter is settled. Faye, Haley, I want 2 of you on standby, just outside the portal for their return. If any backup is needed, then you go straight through. Haley, heal anyone who needs immediate medical attention. The meeting had ended like that, and everyone did as they were asked. Leo quickly put on his gear while the 2 girls waited outside the green portal. It seems like Dell's class is having it tough this year, Haley said. I couldn't agree more. It's almost as if bad luck has been following them around wherever they go, Faye replied. Leo was eventually ready, unhesitatingly entering the portal soon after. The shelter had responded to the emergency response and had closed all shelter gates. No citizens were allowed to leave the shelter at the moment without military clearance. 2 mechs had been sent out to look for the Dalki, with both of them arriving at the crash site. Unfortunately for them, there was no sign of the Dalki. This was the reason why it had taken so long for the mechs to discover the students and the Dalki. But once the mechs had discovered their location, they were able to tell Leo exactly where they were. Men, fall back, Leo shouted. The 2 guys in the mechs did as ordered. The Dalki was holding onto one of the mech's arms, and the guy had no choice but to allow it to be ripped off to break free. Afterward, they immediately backed away and went by the student's side. Another one, the Dalki, said as he saw Leo walking towards him with his hand on his sheath. You really are germs to this whole universe. Look how many of you there are on this planet already. The Dalki looked like he was heavily injured, but that didn't fool Leo. Using his ability, he could see the strong aura emanating off of him. The Dalki had not given up just yet. Why do you fight us? Leo asked. In response to his question, the Dalki ignored him and went in for a strike. Leo responded to his actions by pivoting forward and using a quick draw, pulling out the katana from its sheath and putting it back in an instant. The Dalki felt nothing as his arm had been cleanly sliced off. There was no resistance like everything else before had. It was as if the sword was able to ignore all attributes. The arm went flying up into the air and landed a distance behind Leo, while green blood spewed out from the open wound. You, the Dalki pointed with his other hand. I know who you are. The others had warned me about you. Unfortunately for him, before he could even finish talking, its head had also been cleanly cut off. Was this the only one? Leo asked. For a moment, the students had forgotten to speak, as they were too amazed at what they had just seen. The thing they struggled to defeat with all of them combined was killed just like that. Yes, that's the only one we saw, Layla replied. The two mechs soon ran forward and went down on their knees. Thank you for protecting us, Sergeant Leo. Don't thank me, Leo replied. Thankfully, the Dalki was already on its last legs. You two must have done a good job in injuring the Dalki before I got here. The two soldiers looked at each other in response. They knew that their skills hardly had any effect on the Dalki. In fact, they hadn't even managed to land a hit even once. Nearly all of the wounds that were on the Dalki were on it before they had even gotten there. It couldn't have been the students, could it? They simultaneously thought. If Leo was able to see the expressions on their face, he too would have realized that they were not the ones who had injured the Dalki. Leo and the two soldiers were busy inspecting the Dalki, seeing if they could find anything indicating why he was here. While they were doing that, the others were still tending to Peter, making sure he was okay. In contrast, Quinn's attention was focused on something else. His eyes were fixated on the Dalki's hand that was not too far away from them. He started walking over, and Vorn soon noticed what he was looking at as well. Inspect. Dalki, a half-human, half-beast race. Half-human, half-beast. Quinn looked at it with a confused expression. Aren't the Dalki aliens? Although he was curious about this, he inspected the arm, only to confirm something else. Inspect. Dalki blood. Consuming the blood will have unknown effects on the host. System, do you know what the Dalki blood will do? Quinn asked. No, the system replied rather bluntly. But I will tell you this. If it did any harm to your body, the system would warn you. Quinn then walked over to the arm and dipped his finger in the green blood. He sniffed it a little at first. It had a sweet scent with a hint of mint in it, reminding him of toothpaste. Should I? Quinn thought. The system said it wouldn't hurt me, right? Chapter 138, The Assessment's End. Looking at the green blood, Quinn was unsure what it would do. The system had already confirmed it would have no negative side effects. Or at least it wasn't poisonous. However, it came as a surprise to Quinn that the system didn't know what it did. Unless it was keeping information from him, which again was possible. But if the system was telling the truth, did that mean none of the old or current vampires ever interacted with the Dalki race? But then how did the system know of beast weapons? Everything was suddenly getting confusing for Quinn, as the timelines just didn't make sense. Humans had discovered the use of teleporters and the beast planets in the solar system only once they had fought with the Dalki. The portal technology was originally theirs to begin with. Yet the vampires had never heard of them, yet still had access to beast weapons. Right now, it was clear that Quinn didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle, and just thinking about it would give him a headache. Well, here it goes. The temptation was too much. Quinn imagined anyone in his situation would have done the same thing. As the blood touched his tongue, a mint sensation entered his body. Similar to toothpaste, it wasn't nice, but it wasn't exactly bad. As it went down his throat, a weird tingling sensation could be felt in his body, and then it started to spread all over as if his body was on fire. Right now, Quinn wanted to do anything to let out the energy. Level 1 Dalki blood has been consumed. A 10% increase in all stats. Will last 1 hour. The tingling feeling Quinn felt through his body was hard to describe, and the buff that he got from obtaining it was amazing. It wasn't a set amount like those before it, but a percentage increase, which meant as long as he got stronger, the buff increase went up along with it as well. Quinn looked at the arm again and thought if there was any way of him taking it back with him. Unfortunately, it seemed like non-living matter was unable to enter the dimensional space. When Quinn was back at the school, he decided to do some more tests. First, he had placed a flask into the space, and the object had gone in fine. Then, using some blood he had obtained from Layla, he had placed it into the flask and tried to put it into the space again, but it refused to go in. Once taking out the blood, it would go in again. Quinn then did some more tests by trying it on certain animals and other things, and it looked like any type of living matter, including plants, were unable to be stored into the space. It was a shame, but he was unable to place the arm in the space. But by that time, Leo and the other two were already done with checking out the dead Dalki body. These two will escort you back to the school. Make sure that all your injuries are dealt with. Back to the school. Aaron complained. What about the assessment? It's canceled. All the students in the shelter have already gone back to school, and anyone outside hunting have been brought back, Leo replied. At that point, Aaron knew there was nothing she could do but wait for the school to make an official announcement. As the others walked off with the soldiers, Leo grabbed onto Quinn's wrist. It looks like you stayed true to your word, and you protected them, Leo said. I guess you're on our side after all. Quinn didn't know what to say back. Leo's sudden words were a surprise, to say the least. But as Leo looked past Quinn, he noticed Peter, and he looked slightly different and had a slight tint of purple to his aura similar to Quinn. Although Leo had never taught Peter before, so he was unsure whether Peter always had this aura or not. I'm still keeping my eye on you too, Leo said. But for now, go rest. Quinn quickly rushed off and followed behind the others, but he couldn't help think back to the words that Leo had said. He was keeping an eye on us too. If he wasn't sure about it before, he was sure about it now. Leo knew he was different, and he could tell Peter was now too. But looking at Peter, Quinn was even unsure of what he was himself. When going through the blood ritual, Quinn had assumed that Peter would be changed into either a vampire or a halfling like he first was. But instead, Peter had turned into something called a vampire ghoul. Just then, as the group continued to carry Peter on their shoulders, it seemed like he was starting to wake up. Hey Quinn, get over here, Layla shouted. It looks like he's waking up. As he opened his eyes, Vorden and Layla slowly allowed him to stand on his own 2 feet. What happened? He asked. Then images started to flash through his head of jumping in a way to save Quinn. He quickly looked down at his stomach and noticed a big hole where his uniform should have been, but his stomach didn't have a single mark on it. I think you should talk to Quinn once we have the time, and this is all over, Vorden replied. Anyway, how are you feeling? Layla asked. I'm feeling good, Peter replied. Better than usual, actually, although I'm a bit hungry. As Peter said those words, the three of them looked at each other. Somewhere in an unknown place in a large room, there was a large rectangle table that stretched out far and wide. On the table, there was a total of 13 seats, and each one had a person sitting in them, all apart from one. It was a mixture of men and women, and they all looked all sorts of ages, but they all had one thing in common as they sat in their seats, and that was their red-colored eyes. Behind each of the seats was a single purple-colored flame, just behind them up attached to the wall, and behind the empty seat, there was one that had been lit up as well. A single man sat at the head of the table and started off the conversation. As you can all see, the flame has been lit above the 10th chair. Does that mean he's back? But I thought he had died. Chatter started amongst the 12 in the chairs until the head spoke once again. No, I believe he managed to somehow find someone before he left this world, and they have officially blooded their first, creating a new family. But why now? It's been 100 years. A female shouted. I don't know, but what I do know is we must find this new family and bring them in as soon as possible. Make sure they uphold our laws, and if not, we shall get rid of them all. End of Arc 1.